Romanian Eagle. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 326 Follow-up 2. The 9th Army is retreating to Hungary. What should we do? Major General Hans seemed to have understood the situation before, and as soon as he came up, he asked the most important question of the 10th Army. Point in the face of the Chief of Staff's inquiry, Lieutenant General Sam did not express his thoughts, but asked instead, "Then what's your advice?" Regarding Lieutenant General Sam's request to let him make suggestions, Major General Hans said what he thought of. "I think in the current situation, we have to evacuate." Major General Hans continued to talk about Diva's location on the map. "I think after the 9th Army retreats, the enemy's target must be us. At that time, whether it is troops or weapons, we will not be opponents. At that time, the offense and defense will change positions, and the taste will be unpleasant. So I think it needs to be done sooner. Decide. And we can retreat directly to Edel, while the enemy is still on the front line of Cluj and entangled with the 9th Army. Of course, Lieutenant General Adrasam knew what the Chief of Staff said. This is the main line of traffic on the Hungary-Romania railway line, and there is a southern line to Belgrade, and its origin is a Murray River in the Transylvanian plateau, and it turns back to the Danube River through here. Arguably the strongest point of the city, to defend against a possible Romanian attack. The method of his Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Sam, also admitted that this is the best defensive plan at present. However, retreating like this made Lieutenant General Sam very unwilling. "You're right, Hans, but I don't think we can just go on like this at the moment." Seeing that his Chief of Staff wanted to ask what he meant, because he heard this sentence, Lieutenant General Sam directly stated his considerations. "Hans, I know that your consideration is to reduce the losses of our army, but you only consider military issues. This is not comprehensive. We also need to consider the political and diplomatic influence." Having said that, Sam asked rhetorically, "Chief of Staff, what would happen if we lost Transylvania in a month?" In the face of Sam's inquiry, Major General Hans expressed his consideration. The already bad domestic environment will be more difficult, and diplomatically, the Allies will also have different views on the Empire, and it will affect the Italian campaign prepared by His Majesty. In the face of the Chief of Staff's answer, Lieutenant General Sam nodded. "I know what you're talking about, but I think the most important thing at the moment is to pay attention to the mood of the soldiers. A quarter of the soldiers of our 10th Army are from this land. If they retreat like this, they will be discouraged. It's not good for future battles." Lieutenant General Sam actually didn't say a word here, so he would be reluctant to attach the Heavy Artillery Brigade. This 3rd Independent Heavy Artillery Brigade of the Austro-Hungarian Army, commanded by Major General Kloss, cost the efforts of the Imperial Army. The Heavy Artillery Brigade, composed of nearly 100 150, 180, 210, and 240 caliber grenades and cannons, is a treasure that the armies of all countries are jealous of. The Austro-Hungarian army had only 6 brigades in total, and Lieutenant General Sam used it carefully for fear that it would suffer heavy losses. And if you retreat according to what Major General Hans said, then it will be difficult for this Heavy Artillery Brigade to return to Edel. Because Diva is hundreds of kilometers away from Edel, at the slow speed of the Heavy Artillery Brigade, it will take at least 5 days, but the Romanians don't need that much time to surround them. Therefore, whether Lieutenant General Sam is to stabilize the Transylvanian soldiers or to keep the 3rd Heavy Artillery Brigade, he needs to fight the Romanians. Lieutenant General Sam, through Dua's battle, felt that the Romanians were not too short or too strong, and he still had hope of keeping the heavy artillery and stabilizing the army. By the way, Hans, we can't just walk away like this. Looking at the map in front of him, Lieutenant General Sam quickly searched for a suitable location for combat, and soon a place named Diva and Edel appeared in front of him. "We played against them in Missio, and these Romanians can't be allowed to be too presumptuous. But if Salamak in front of us dares to come out of the tortoise shell, give him a hard taste." Following Lieutenant General Sam's order, the Austro-Hungarian 10th Army began preparations for its withdrawal. The changes in the Austro-Hungarian army immediately caught the attention of the Diva defenders in the headquarters of Army Group South in Diva. General Salomik was considering the withdrawal of the Austro-Hungarian army. Admiral, we can't just let them evacuate, otherwise this defensive operation will be too much for our entire army. The one who is giving a generous speech is Lieutenant General Ankada, the mentally retarded, of the 1st Division of the Imperial Guard. Of course, he is not only speaking to the general alone, but to every division commander who participated in the Battle of Dua. Lieutenant General Ankada's speech embarrassed General Salomik. Originally, he planned to announce the good news that Cluj had been captured. Who knew that after hearing that Cluj had been captured, these division commanders immediately talked about how to expand the results of the war. And Admiral Salomik didn't think much at first, and the topics discussed by these division leaders were unified. The topic also changed from how to expand the results of the campaign to how to hold back the Austro-Hungarian 10th Army, until Lieutenant General Friat brought reinforcement to destroy the enemy's heavy corps in one fell swoop. And Admiral Salomik, who was watching all this, knew that this was a division belonging to Army Group South Field. However, not everyone agrees with Lieutenant General Ankada, and he also intends to be more stable. But now our troops are not strong enough to hold back the enemy, so let's wait until the friendly forces of Cluj arrive. However, the speaker was quickly turned back. Colonel Antonescu, let's do your division's work well, and don't have deserters, otherwise it will be a joke. After saying this, Antonescu obviously heard laughter coming out, which was someone who couldn't help laughing. However, Antonescu was very unwilling in the face of this situation, but there was no way. Who let the division he led was only a division that was only mobilized, and he is only a deputy. If the division commander had not let him take over the army due to a sudden illness, he would not even have the qualifications to sit here. After seeing the other voices that were emerging to be suppressed, Admiral Salomik knew that this was the unanimous decision of the main division commanders of his subordinates. In fact, Admiral Salomik himself felt very aggrieved in this Diva battle, and after seeing that everyone agreed, he was also willing to be a favored man. After all, the group army is only a temporary establishment, and it will not be seen in the future, and the danger of delaying the Austro-Hungarian army this time is not too great. Since everyone agrees, then I decided to dispatch the 1st, 15th, and 18th divisions of the Imperial Guard to attack and entangle the enemy, so that they cannot leave in such a comfortable way. The other divisions continue to be on alert to guard against possible sudden attacks by the enemy. At this point, Salomik paused and continued. However, the troops you attack should pay attention, and they must withdraw when they find that the enemy has a reflexive attack. As ordered. All the division commanders present could understand what Admiral Salomik said. It would be too embarrassing to make a big somersault before the end of the battle. Sure enough, after the containment attack launched by the Southern Army, it was immediately counterattacked by the Austro-Hungarian 10th Army. However, this was only a reflection of the 10th Army. After Friat hurriedly arrived with the elites of the Center Army and the North Army, Lieutenant General Sam's 10th Army finally couldn't stand it. Facing an attack of nearly 300,000 Romanian elites, the 10th Army was defeated like a mountain. However, after the Romanian army drove it out of Transylvania, it did not continue to pursue it, because Romania was the biggest threat, and the German army on the Eastern Front had reached the border and the test had just begun. Chapter 327 Follow-up 3. The news of the conquest of Cluj and the capture of Transylvania caused a violent reaction like a tide. Nearly 100,000 people held a grand parade in the capital Bucharest, and King Edel of Romania took the whole family to drink and celebrate. When Edel appeared on the square with the left hand holding Princess Mary, who was smiling rigidly, and the right hand holding the little Prince Victor, who was poking his head out of curiosity, the people present cheered unanimously. Long live the king. Long live Romania. Seeing the parade crowd excited by the cheers, Edel waved to them with a smile, which resulted in even more cheers. Prime Minister Bricianu, who stood aside and watched the king accept the public's salute, nodded with satisfaction. The parade planned by him is worth it. I believe that tomorrow people all over the country will know about the celebration ceremony in the capital. Coupled with the good news of the occupation of Transylvania, I believe that it can stimulate the patriotic sentiment of the people and allow Romania to mobilize more power. It was a grand parade, and it was a really good move for His Majesty to take the stage at the end point. When the Prime Minister was thinking about the future, a voice came from beside him. Prime Minister Bricianu didn't need to look to know that it was the voice of Admiral Pletian beside him. He glanced at the Chief of Staff next to him and said, "All this was created by the king, and of course we have to express our gratitude in the rear." After the Prime Minister replied casually, he continued to chat about the topic. The government's mobilization work in Moldavia has basically been completed. We have delivered enough supplies to Suceava, Iași and Galați. I wonder how sure your military is about the enemy's attack point. Prezhan was a little surprised to hear the Prime Minister talking about Moldavia at this time, but this was only an accident, and he knew exactly what the Prime Minister was thinking. It is nothing more than worrying about whether the defenders in Moldavia can resist the German attack from Ukraine and Galicia. The question of the Prime Minister needs to be asked by General Courtois, because the one who knows the most about the situation is the Minister of War, and I can't give you an answer here. Faced with the slick answer from the Chief of General Staff, the Prime Minister was somewhat dissatisfied. But now it's celebration time, and it's hard for me to ask myself. It seems that I need to find some time to ask the Minister of the Army. It's just that the Minister of the Army has already rushed to the Moldavia region, and no one can answer this question. His Excellency the Minister of War was inspecting Suceava, while the Prime Minister was talking about General Courtois. After serving as the commander of the defense of Moldavia, General Courtois immediately inspected several key defense cities thanks to the fact that the Romanian army has always placed the main threat on the Russian army. Many strong strongholds have been built in the Moldavia region adjacent to Russia. These strongholds allowed the Romanian army to use a small number of troops to contain the attack from the Russian side. However, in the face of Suceava in Austria-Hungary, there is no such convenience. This is what the Admiral is worried about, so it is reasonable to observe Suceava's fortifications in person. In addition to his entourage, Major General Antic, who was in charge of Suceava's defense, accompanied the general on the inspection. The fortifications are not bad. Admiral Courtois stood in a sturdy bunker that still smelled of cement, and expressed his feelings to Major General Antic, who was accompanying him. In the face of His Excellency's praise, Major General Antic said with a smile, "This is the result of everyone's hard work." Antic pointed to the fortifications in front of him. "Admiral, the bunker in front of us is part of the fulcrum fortification we have prepared. The main function is to provide supplies to the soldiers who are fighting nearby. The fort is divided into a main fort and a sub-fort. The main fort serves as the center for personnel rest and material reserves. The fort is equipped with machine guns and artillery for defense use. The fort is a reinforced concrete structure with a wall thickness of nearly 1 meter and a top structure thickness of 1 meter. According to our calculations, it can be immune to attacks by the enemy's 210 heavy artillery. In addition, we also built an underground passage connecting the sub-fortress and the main fortress, and below the main fortress we also built a military storage room, an ammunition warehouse, a field hospital, a water supply room, a communication and telegraph room, etc. After listening to Major General Antic's explanation, Admiral Courtois nodded with satisfaction, and then he asked curiously, "How many fortresses like this have you prepared?" "There are 6 in total. In addition, relying on the solid structure of the city government building, we have also built more solid fortifications, which are the headquarters and final stronghold of the city's defense operations." Hearing Major General Antic say some heavy topics, His Excellency the Minister of War simply skipped the following words. Instead, he asked curiously, "That's 7 large bunkers, plus the 354 small fortifications mentioned earlier. Your fortifications are very well built and have exceeded my expectations. Can you say that?" "No problem." Major General Antic expressed the doubts of Admiral Courtois. "I was able to build so many fortifications in more than a month, mainly because of the cooperation of government departments. Because we are close to Galicia in Austria-Hungary, the people of the city are prepared to fight here after the declaration of war. So when the fortifications were built, the people actively helped, and the government also collected more than 400 tons of cement and 300 tons of steel for us to build the fortifications. Hearing Major General Antic's explanation, General Courtois said with a smile, "With the 500 tons of cement and 200 tons of steel distributed to you before, it seems that you are richer than my building materials." Facing the teasing of His Excellency the Admiral, Antich agreed. "This is all the support of all parties and the dedication of the people. Okay, don't be so humble. I can see your credit in this." Courtois continued. "We have received information that the German army is almost assembled in Chernovtsi. The commander of these German forces is Marshal Mackensen, so your task is not easy at all." Antich was silent for a while when he heard the Admiral's words. He is no stranger to the combat power of the German army. He has also been rotated to the Eastern Front as an observer before and has a full understanding of its combat capabilities. As for Marshal Mackensen, Antich believes that he is the best German general in the Eastern Front. "This battle is not easy to fight." So Antich said, after thinking about it, "Admiral, I will do my best to defend this city. Not just your best effort. I need you to defend for at least a month." Admiral Courtois' request surprised Antich, and he retorted involuntarily, "Your Excellency, is this a bit too high a request?" "Not high at all." Admiral Courtois answered without question. Taking into account Major General Antich's feelings, he explained, "I have studied the Battle of Verdun and the offensive and defensive Battle of the Fortress of the Sun, and the heavy artillery of the two sides plays the most important role, so I have prepared an additional 210 heavy artillery battalion for you. And in order to give you enough support, I will also let the Air Force ensure your air superiority. Of course, if necessary, let it suppress the enemy's artillery to relieve your pressure." Admiral Courtois said that to ensure air superiority, the biggest proof is the 2nd Aviation Wing that has been prepared in Romain and Icy as the 2nd wing to ensure the air defense needs of the Moldavian defenders and suppress the German air vision task. Its existing more than 480 combat aircraft are its credentials. Thank you very much for your attention to Susava, but I still have a cautious attitude towards defending for a month. When Major General Antich heard this, he felt a lot more at ease, but the disadvantage of troops was still his most troublesome target. Therefore, for His Excellency Admiral's support, he can only thank, but not make promises. Seeing that Major General Antich did not agree to the 1-month guarantee, Admiral Courtois did not want to mention it. It seems that the idea of using Susava to consume the enemy and then counterattack is going to waste. Next, he needs to give Roman and Yassi some more defensive weapons. Chapter 328, Adjustment of the Center of Gravity. News of the disastrous defeat of the Austro-Hungarian army in Transylvania shocked the Austro-Hungarian leadership as Cluj was conquered. Among them, the most uncomfortable is the Kingdom of Hungary. As one of the pillars of the dual empire, Budapest is somewhat afraid of the Romanian army approaching the Hungarian Great Plain. After Cluj was captured, its prime minister, Tisza, Hungary has a separate prime minister, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire has its own set of governments and parliaments. In addition to the monarch, has sent 3 telegrams to Karolyi, hoping to get enough troops to protect Hungary. This made Karolyi, who had been gathering troops and materials to prepare for the Italian campaign, very dissatisfied. When Lieutenant General Sam's 10th Army also retreated to Adela, the telegrams from Budapest reached a peak. In just 7 days, 5 telegrams requesting reinforcement arrived in front of Emperor Karolyi. For this reason, Karolyi was very dissatisfied, and he even complained personally when discussing the situation of the Italian war with Archduke Friedrich, the Minister of War. Don't these Hungarians have a bit of strategic vision to see that there is no possibility that the Romanians are a threat to Hungarian territory? In the face of the emperor complaining about the panic of the Hungarians in public, Archduke Friedrich persuaded him to save the siege. "Your Majesty, many people in Hungary have already seen it, but ordinary people don't have such a vision. So in order to appease these people, Budapest must also make a move to request reinforcement." Finally, Archduke Friedrich spoke, "And the Hungarian Great Plain is one of our few grain-producing regions, so we need to be careful about Budapest's request." Facing the persuasion of the Minister of War, Karolyi was a little helpless. The Kingdom of Hungary was too important in the empire. Whether it is military, food, or political considerations, it is necessary to take into account the feelings of the Hungarians. So Karolyi considered it again and again, reluctantly to draw a team from the army that he was preparing to fight to meet the wishes of the Hungarians. Of course, he was unwilling to let the reinforcement dispatched by Karolyi, let alone elites, not to give the newly formed troops. Therefore, it was almost a year since its formation, and the 16th Army, which had been serving as a reserve before, was selected as a reinforcement for Hungary. There is no big problem with this group army, except for the poor training intensity. The quality of the soldiers is poor, mainly due to the increase in the age of the Austro-Hungarian conscription. And the supporting weapons such as artillery, machine guns and other supporting weapons are not big. The problem is that there may be some deficiencies in the offense, but there are more mistakes in defense. Of course, the mobilization of a group army of more than 100,000 people is of course a major event. Among them, the preparation of wagons, the preparation of living materials for people to eat and horses, and the comfort of the soldiers' emotions all need to be done. These will also be exposed in front of people who care, and Romania is currently one of the most enthusiastic people about the situation of the Austro-Hungarian army, and the other is of course Italy, which is known for its repeated defeats and battles. When Austria-Hungary dispatched the 16th Army as reinforcement to reinforce Hungary, when it reached Bucharest, everyone in Romania rejoiced. It seems that Austria-Hungary is now focusing on Italy, which is excellent news. To this end, Admiral Ploiesti can make bold assignments, and the Romanian elites who are currently gathered in Transylvania fill the vacancies in other directions. For example, the 2nd, 3rd, 7th, and 12th divisions of the Imperial Guard have already arranged for trains to be transferred to the front line in Bulgaria, which is preparing for the upcoming Bulgarian campaign. The 6th, 9th, and 16th divisions were also moving to Moldavia for fear of the German attack. A large number of troops were transferred, and of course, a large number of troops were transferred to Transylvania, such as the 34th, 47th, 61st, and 69th divisions, etc., and a large number of newly formed troops were arranged to replace the vacancy of the drafted troops. So now the transport situation in Romania is busier than it was after the war, which especially made the head of the General Staff Transportation Office, who was in charge of the matter, ripped off a lot of hair. One more thing to say here. According to the Romanian militarized division of the establishment, the troops formed by the militia and a small number of active duty soldiers use the divisions of 30 to 59 units. And the troops composed entirely of conscripted soldiers and a small number of officers were designated as division level establishments after 60 point. So you can see that the major general and the lieutenant general are the teachers, and the lieutenant colonel is also the teacher. However, according to the military's default rules, of course, the standing divisions command the newly formed troops, and when there are no standing divisions, the divisions formed by the militia command the divisions formed by the reserve. Of course, in addition to the deployment of troops, the commander of the group army who is responsible for commanding operations also has new arrangements. Among them, Lieutenant General Farit, who proposed to lure the Austro-Hungarian 10th Army to attack, and sent troops to attack Cluj, has stepped down as the commander of the army. In consideration of his keen battlefield insight, Farit will serve as commander of Army Group Bulgaria, responsible for attacking Bulgaria with the Allies, in order to get it out of the war. And Lieutenant General Andrew, who previously served as the commander of Army Group Center and personally captured Cluj, will also be sent to Moldavia to serve as Deputy General Courtois. The main consideration was because he had served as the commander of the raid mission and had more or less experience in defending possible German raids. This also shows that the current Romanian military is afraid of the mobile combat master Marshal Mackensen leading the elite German army. As for General Salamik, he was responsible for the overall defense of the newly captured Transylvania region. This is also in full consideration of the fact that His Excellency the Old Admiral had fought with the Austro-Hungarian army for so long and even with inferior military strength, and made an outstanding contribution to the rapid capture of Cluj. Of course, His Excellency the Old General suffered some secret losses in preventing the retreat of the enemy's 10th Army of Austria-Hungary, but it doesn't matter of course. In addition to this, there were many casualties in the previous divisions of the Southern Army, which needed to be repaired urgently, which was also a major factor. because at present, the only place that can get the opportunity to repair and take on the defensive task is the Transylvania area. And General Salomik served as its commander before, so it is logical to continue to be in charge of commanding the Transylvania army with the Southern Army as the backbone point, of course. As an incentive to quickly capture Transylvania, Lieutenant General Ankada, who was responsible for taking Diva, was also promoted, and now he has become the deputy commander of the newly formed Transylvanian army. From the senior commander to the deputy commander of the group army, Lieutenant General Ankada has been very satisfied. Originally, he thought that he would get a promotion after the war, but he didn't expect to have the opportunity now. You must know that promotion in the war and post-war are two concepts. He can be a member of the team responsible for commanding the completion of strategic plans in the war, much better than commanding a division to fight. The former is the military planner and implementer, the latter is the executor. This is the gap in status. Chapter 329, The German Offensive. 1. After the Romanian army used the time difference to assemble the main force to take Transylvania, it was immediately ready to supplement the defense points of various regions. The German army expected by various countries was finally ready. Under the leadership of the famous Marshal Mackensen, they launched an attack on the defenders of Moldavia, which had already been prepared point as the Suceava defenders, who were directly facing the first wave of the German attack, facing the elite German soldiers who had an absolute advantage in strength and firepower. They could only rely on the solid fortifications built in the city to defend. In the face of the Romanian defenders who were unable to shrink, the Germans, who had already anticipated this situation, immediately took out the heirloom artillery they used on the eastern front to attack. The way the Germans attacked was as expected by Major General Antic, the commander of the city defense, and he was not in vain for the observation group 2 years ago. To this end, he prepared a plan, intending to use the heavy artillery regiment left by Admiral Courtois to give the enemy a disarm, so that the attacking Germans could taste the power of the Romanians. Now I order to start the artillery counter-attack immediately. In addition, I will send a telegram to Admiral Courtois to ensure that Suceava sky is in our hands. When Major General Antic, who was staying in the headquarters, picked up the phone and gave orders to the heavy artillery unit, he did not forget to make a request to His Excellency General Point. After the order was issued, the heavy artillery hidden in various parts of the city unveiled their disguise and launched a counter-attack at the enemy, who bombarded their friendly forces. For a time, several heavy artillery positions of the German army were forced to move, and the artillery shells that fell on the heads of the Romanian soldiers also stopped point. This has stabilized the mood of a large number of troops composed of reserve soldiers. After all, most of them have never experienced such artillery fire. Facing the overwhelming heavy artillery bombardment, it is completely normal to be mentally restless, especially when a familiar comrade in arms is hit by artillery fire in front of his eyes. This kind of pressure can easily get out of control. After all, they have not been training in the army for a long time, and the civilians have not been corrected in their hearts. This is also the most worrying point of Major General Antic, the commander of the garrison point. In his opinion, Suceava, who he is defending, is most likely to be broken into time periods. The first is that in the first 3 days, a large number of troops composed of reserve militiamen have not yet shed their civilian essence in their minds. An attack so violent that they can't take it will break their hearts, leaving Suceava's defense out of the question point. So what is a violent attack? This depends on who the opponent is. With a large number of recruits like Suceava, the heavy artillery bombardment, coupled with the continuous infantry offensive that seems to never stop, is the most dangerous. So in the beginning, in order for the soldiers to survive this potentially panic-stricken moment, the necessary artillery support was essential. Even if there will be a lot of losses for this, it will at least boost the morale of the defending soldiers and let them know that they can get support and will not be abandoned, which is very important for soldiers on this point. Lieutenant General Gustav, who was in charge of commanding the German siege battle, also deeply agreed. So he was a big one at the beginning, opening with 600 artillery pieces. Among them, there are more than 230 heavy artillery with a caliber of more than 150 mm. Then the first wave was the attack of the 3 divisions, for which he also invited Marshal Mackensen to watch the battle point with a skull cap of the Death Hussars and the unique looking Marshal Mackensen with a long beard. He said to Gustav, who was commanding the siege battle, while watching the Romanians counterattack, "The opposing commander is still very smart, and your onslaught tactics are likely to fail." Point in the face of his boss's words, Lieutenant General Gustav retorted with confidence, "Marshal, this is not necessarily. Even if he sees my intentions, he may not be able to resist this attack." Point what gave him such confidence was the soldiers' technical and tactical skills and efficient organizational skills brought about by years of war. In layman's terms, Gustav intends to use his troops' understanding and familiarity with the battlefield to pull Romanian defenders who have never seen the world into scenes familiar to the Germans and use them. Therefore, Gustav still arranged an attack when the artillery was attracted by the Romanian counterattack, resulting in a decrease in the effectiveness of the artillery shelling. I saw that when the German artillery extended back and bombarded. The 3 German divisions who had already prepared their positions immediately launched a tide-like attack. Quick, the Germans are coming up, all stand up and prepare to fight back. At the Romanian position, a young company commander is directing his soldiers to prepare for battle. From his youthful face, it can be seen that this is an officer who just came out of the military academy. The soldiers under his command are all old and young, and they all seem to be recruited for a short period of time and have a civilian atmosphere. With the company commander's cry, the soldiers all stood up to prepare for a life and death battle with the incoming German troops. But apart from that, there were quite a few soldiers huddled and shivering in the trenches. The young company commander was stunned when he saw this situation. This was something the military academy had never taught. Fortunately, he had heard of how to deal with this situation before, and although he felt that he still couldn't understand it, he didn't expect that other methods would only be used in the future. I saw the company commander with pimples on his face, raised his feet in high-top military boots, and kicked at a shivering soldier who was still crouching in the trench. In the past, cursing words were also chanted in his mouth. "Damn, you cowards, get up for me, the enemies are all under your nose, do you want your mother to protect you?" As the young company commander's roar sounded, the soldiers who were still trembling with fear in the trenches all stood up, and what made them stand up was not only the pain, but also the inner shame. Because of the ease of command and management, most of them came from a village or a street. Their behavior of hiding in the trenches because of fear was seen by familiar neighbors, and they were ashamed. After overcoming their fear after the company commander saw that the soldiers were all standing up and preparing to counterattack the enemy, he was also satisfied to prepare for the next command. "Yonkers, your machine gun needs to be ordered by me to fire. Understand? Clear." Yonkers, who was stopped by the company commander, was a former auto mechanic. After 3 months of emergency training, he joined their newly formed company as a machine gunner, and he was the only Madsen machine gun in their company. Sustained support firepower. This time, the young company commander seemed to have his own combat ideas for the German attack. Yonkers' answer was quite satisfactory to the company commander, so he turned his head and stared at the German troops slowly approaching the position, and told the soldiers who were waiting, "Now everyone listens to my password. Do you understand that I need to shoot before shooting?" In the face of the young company commander's words, the soldiers present had long since had a conditioned reflex, and they all answered in unison clear. Chapter 330, The German Offensive, Part 2. As the soldiers from both sides approached, the company commander immediately shouted, "Fire!" The soldiers who had been waiting on the position immediately followed the 3-point and 1-line shooting requirements and aimed at the enemy rushing towards them. Then there was the sound of dense gunfire, and nearly 10 German troops attacking the position fell. The company commander, who was observing the position, immediately shouted with joy when he saw the result. "Good fight. Keep shooting like this to suppress the enemy." However, the ensuing battle gave the defenders a glimpse of the enemy's combat effectiveness. After being attacked by the defenders, the attacking Germans immediately began to approach them using obstacles such as craters, earth bags, and trees. During its march, it is basically a cat waist and a curve, and it will fight back when it can use obstacles as cover. The German counterattack firepower is not as dense as this, but the accuracy is much higher than this, and it is often the key to hit the defenders with one shot. This made the Romanian soldiers who were defending the position feel jealous, and felt that, in order to ensure their own safety, they should try to shrink in the trenches, to reduce the danger of being found and hit by the enemy. So many soldiers dodged and shot at the enemy pointers. Just that this kind of shooting leads to a drop in interception firepower, allowing more enemies to attack calmly. When the young company commander in the defensive position saw that the situation was wrong, he immediately commanded the command line regardless of the result of the exposure of the hidden firepower. Machine gun fire to suppress the momentum of the enemy's attack point. As the voice fell, the only machine gun on the position roared furiously. With the suppression of the machine guns, it is really different. In the face of the continuous output of the machine guns, the German offensive was stagnant. This time, the soldiers' mood was improved, and even the shooting efficiency was improved a lot. However, only the company commander himself knew that this was only a temporary advantage, and his exposed firepower would immediately attract a German counterattack. Sure enough, the machine gun did not suppress the enemy for too long. With the bombardment of the accompanying artillery by the German army, several 57 and 75 shells fell on the machine gun position. The machine gun that had previously given the defenders a huge advantage was destroyed in this way. In the face of a good opportunity to weaken the firepower of the defenders. Of course, the attackers who have fought for many years will not miss it. A large number of German soldiers who use the natural bunkers on the battlefield to advance interactively accelerated their movements, which immediately accelerated their advance a lot, and also put a lot of pressure on the defending side. The shooting action of many defending soldiers involuntarily accelerated, and there were even soldiers who closed their eyes and shot without aiming. This made Major General Antic, who stayed behind to watch the game, feel a little uncomfortable, and he immediately instructed the division commander who was defending the peripheral positions. Immediately arrange for your reinforcement to come up. The front line will be unstoppable. The division commander defending this position replied nervously and ashamed. I'll take the reserve team up here. In the face of the first German attack, his position was crumbling. This situation made the colonel feel ashamed, so this time he planned to go to the front line to see it himself. Major General Antic instructed the teacher casually. Then you go. After speaking, he immediately took the field phone. Get me the headquarters of the 33rd and 45th Divisions immediately. The reason for letting Major General Antic call the two divisions is that according to observation, the strength and artillery of the German attack was far higher than his previous estimates, and the performance of his frontline soldiers also did not meet expectations, so the reserve forces were used in advance. That is a last resort. Some people may ask, can't we give up the outer positions and retreat to the fortifications in the city? Major General Antic's answer is of course no. The reason is very simple, because most of the soldiers in the defending army are recruits who lack training. If the peripheral positions are abandoned at the first time, the impact of the photo will make the soldiers doubt the next battle, and it is absolutely impossible when there is no morale army. Hold your ground. So this is also what Major General Antic would rather suffer some losses in the early stage, and also send troops to block the German attack first. Soon two divisions were connected to the other end of the phone, and Major General Antic immediately ordered the two divisions to reinforce the outer positions. With the arrival of Romanian reinforcement, the defenses on the outer positions were gradually stabilized. There were many positions that were attacked by the Germans, and the enemy was driven back by the strength of the reinforcement. There was even a section of positions that had already been taken by the enemy, but were abandoned because of the siege of the superior force of the defenders. Seeing the German soldiers who were reluctant to give up their hard work to seize positions and retreat, the Romanian soldiers who endured huge casualties cheered heartily. Even if this is only a defense against a German attack, this is a happy thing for Romanian soldiers to defend their homeland. After all, after a life and death battle, everyone who survives has a reason to defend himself. Soldiers can forget their grief and pain and cheer for themselves, while commanders need to prepare for the next battle, knowing that a tougher battle awaits them. As for Major General Antic, who was commanding the defense, he only realized now that he did not know enough about the German army. Is this the number of casualties reported incorrectly? Looking at the casualty report in his hand, Antic questioned the chief of staff who sent the report. That's right. This is the result of the statistics that I'm personally responsible for, and I have repeatedly compared it with the frontline commander, so I can't be wrong. Hearing the explanation from the chief of staff, Antic felt his head was as big as a bucket. Of course, he knew that it would not be his chief of staff miscalculating the number, but the red casualty report showed a total of 14,764 casualties, which made him feel dazzling. He lost a division formation, conscription and mobilization division formation, in just one battle. How could he accept such a result? However, the statistical report showed that the three divisions defending the peripheral positions suffered 3,961, 3,684, and 3,781 casualties respectively, and more than 3,000 casualties were still incurred by the two reinforcement, which fully demonstrated the tenacity of the enemy. Looking at Major General Antic's unbelievable eyes, the chief of staff couldn't help but suggest, such casualties are too high. Should we withdraw the city defense first? The chief of staff's suggestion made Antic unable to care about the number of casualties, so he stopped immediately. Not now, we can't withdraw from the outer positions now. Why? The chief of staff was very puzzled by Antic's words in the face of the chief of staff's question. Antic explained, Chief of staff, I know you feel distressed about the number of casualties, but we can't withdraw yet. Because if we withdraw to the city now, the enemy will immediately know that we can't bear the casualties and retreat back, so the next attack is expected to be even larger. This is a result that we cannot bear at present, so we need to make the illusion that the casualties are still within the acceptable range, then withdrawing from the outer positions cannot be done. Major General Antic patted the casualty statistics report and continued. You're talking about, according to your statistics, the German casualties also reached 4,000. I believe that this number is not too bad for the folio. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 331, The German Offensive, Part 2. When Major General Antic was distressed by the casualties of his soldiers, some people were as distressed as he was. The casualties of such an attack are too great. In the German headquarters outside the city, the chief of staff who handed the casualty statistics report to Lieutenant General Gustav couldn't help but say. After taking a look at the total number of casualties, Lieutenant General Gustav nodded with satisfaction. Such casualties are still within my expected range and acceptable. His Excellency Lieutenant General's satisfied tone made the chief of staff somewhat dissatisfied. Are you satisfied with such a casualty report? 2,468 people were killed and 2,501 were injured, of which 1,541 were seriously injured and disabled. Are you satisfied with this report of more than 5,000 casualties? In the face of his chief of staff's emotional outbursts, Lieutenant General Gustav continued to speak in his calm tone. You also need to see the number of casualties of the defending enemy. As a defender, the casualties are around 13,000, which is not a good number. You must know that they are defensive operations and have fortifications as their support, but the casualties are still so large. It seems that the enemy has the combat effectiveness of the troops deployed outside the city is not high. Lieutenant General Gustav's level was good, which immediately made the chief of staff look away from the casualty report. It seems that you are right. So will you continue to attack like this next? Facing the topic of concern to the chief of staff, Gustav smiled and shook his head, waving the casualty report in his hand. Such casualties are enough to make the soldiers who attacked today nervous, which needs to be slowed down. And if we continue to maintain such a strong offensive, it will frighten the commander of the defending army if he takes into account the large casualties and does not defend the outer positions. Are we going to let our soldiers fight in the streets? After Lieutenant General Gustav finished speaking, he looked at a few photos on his desk, which were impressively the fortresses and fortifications built by Major General Antic in the city of Suceava. It seems that the Germans have known Suceava well for a long time, and they have enough knowledge about the degree of fortification of Suceava, so being able to kill the defenders on the periphery is also good for the Germans on the offensive side. Choose point. The German attack on Suceava was suppressed for the next 2 days, and the daily casualty figures of nearly 7 or 8,000 people made Major General Antic very uncomfortable. For this reason, he was about to lose his hair. How many casualties are there today? Looking at the number of casualties for 2 consecutive days, Major General Antic felt like he was caught in the enemy's trap. The Chief of Staff, whose face was even uglier than Antic, vented on the casualty figures. Now we have 30,000 casualties in 3 days, and we'll have no one in a week. The words of the Chief of Staff made Antic, who had been following the German attack, startled for a moment. Recalling some of the German offensive moves in the past 2 days, an idea flashed in my mind. After realizing it, he patted his head and scolded himself loudly. Damn, Antic, you are an idiot. You were used by the enemy. The Chief of Staff was not slow to respond. He said directly, you are saying that the enemy did this on purpose these 2 days. Should be. Major General Antic continued to talk about what he thought was different. It's no wonder that the German army had the opportunity to take our peripheral positions in the past 2 days, but it was a step behind in reinforcement. Now it seems that the enemy did it on purpose. I used to wonder that the enemy had no brains, but now it seems that they have no brains. It's me. Hearing Antic's analysis, the Chief of Staff interjected and asked, then what are we going to do now? Are we going to withdraw to the city immediately? Facing the proposal of the Chief of Staff, Antic waved to stop it. No, it's too cheap for us to withdraw them like this. Since they set a trap for us to consume our troops, then I will also teach them a lesson. In the face of Major General Antic's words, the Chief of Staff asked directly, what are you going to do? Right now I'm just an idea, and I need a good idea. After a night of silence, the morning of the 4th day came, and the Germans began to prepare for the attack again. As usual, the artillery bombarded first, and the Romanians' counter-attack artillery fires still arrived as scheduled. Under the orders of Lieutenant General Gustav, the Germans continued to attack the defending Romanian positions. Attack quickly. The German attack was under the command of officers, and the soldiers rushed to the Romanian positions like a tide, and the counter-attack from the positions was still so strong. Watch out for enemy machine guns. Look at the movement of the enemy on the position. Under the command of the officers, the attacking German soldiers advanced to the position skillfully. The resistance of the enemy's position is declining. A low-ranking officer looked at the firepower of the counter-attack on the position and said with a little surprise. The feeling of attacking the German troops was also seen by Lieutenant General Gustav, who was watching the battle from behind. However, unlike what he observed ahead, he could accurately observe that this was a drop in firepower on a position through the telescope. Faced with this situation, the Chief of Staff, who watched the battle together, asked curiously, what are these Romanians doing, and why is there a fire gap? Lieutenant General Gustav was also a little confused by the words of the Chief of Staff. If he planned to retreat after resisting, then the firepower of the position should be reduced, and this is the first time that the firepower density of this position has decreased. Faced with the unclear situation, Lieutenant General Gustav could only point to that position and give an order. Let the commander in the middle of the attack pay attention. Just pay more attention when attacking, and the rest will continue as planned. The situation is not bright now, and Gustav, as the commander, cannot give up the attack because of some abnormal actions of the enemy. This will be irresponsible to the attacking soldiers. Now it's better to let the frontline commanders pay more attention. Just as the Germans attacking this position approached, the counter-attack firepower on the position suddenly increased. Gustav, who observed this, nodded. It turned out to be a firepower density strategy, which doesn't take us too seriously. As soon as Lieutenant General Gustav finished speaking, the commander in charge of the attack immediately increased the intensity of the attack. For a time, the intensity of the exchange of fire in this position was far more intense than that in other areas. However, the duration of this exchange of fire will not be too long, mainly because the defending soldiers cannot compare with the attacking German army. So after a period of fierce exchange of fire, some unsupported defenders began to retreat. Hey, the enemy didn't send reinforcement this time, Lieutenant General Gustav said in surprise. After seeing his soldiers enter the position point, maybe the garrison commander has already sensed our intentions. The chief of staff, who also observed this situation, said uncertainly. Gustav couldn't help muttering at the words of the chief of staff. Then what's the point of the defenders continuing to resist here? An idea flashed through his mind, and Lieutenant General Gustav's expression changed drastically. Not good. What's wrong? This position is dangerous, and the garrison commander wants to trick us. It is a pity that the conversation between the two was not heard by the frontline soldiers in time. Just as they were talking, there were deafening explosions in this position point. I saw this position exploded violently, and the German soldiers who had just entered the position were basically affected by the explosion and suffered heavy casualties. At this time, the defending army suddenly burst into fierce artillery fire, bombarding the head of the attacking German army, which made the German soldiers who had been accustomed to their artillery being suppressed by their own inexplicably panicked. Taking this opportunity, the defending soldiers immediately took up their weapons to break away from contact with the German army and move to the rear. Seeing this situation, Lieutenant General Gustav's heart rushed straight to the top of his head. At this time, he didn't know that he was being overcast by his opponent. However, after fighting for many years, Lieutenant General Gustav stabilized his body and suffered a dull loss. If he was angry again, he would probably make his opponent laugh out loud. After recovering, Lieutenant General Gustav said to his chief of staff with a smile as usual, "Very good. It seems that this loss is settled for me now." In the right hand of Lieutenant General Gustav, who was not noticed, a large hole has been squeezed out of a report in his hand. And as Major General Antic, who had been attacking the Germans, was checking his own gains and losses in order to prepare for this explosion, we have used 60% of the explosives in the inventory. And in order to ensure the evacuation of the troops, all our artillery counterattacked the enemy, causing us to lose 14 guns. This time the casualties were not large, only the loss more than 1,000 people. After talking about the battle damage, the chief of staff continued to report the battle results. This time we eliminated at least 3,000 German troops. We can accept this result. Moreover, this time the German troops suffered from a dull performance, which made our soldiers' emotions stabilize a lot, and the next battle will be much better. No, you're wrong, Chief of Staff. Major General Antich interrupted the Chief of Staff. Accurately speaking, the enemy was provoked. Our next battle will be much more difficult. I don't know how many soldiers will hate me after the fight is over. The fact that the Germans suffered losses in Suceava this time also reached the ears of Marshal Mackensen, who was in command of him, but after glancing at the report, he asked his chief of staff, Major General Maximum Huffman, "Are there any signs of reinforcement from the Romanian army?" The genius who planned many battles including the Battle of Tannenberg replied, "At present, we have not learned the situation yet, but their main force in Transylvania is constantly being drawn back. Some of them are arranged to be assembled in Baku, and the other part is assembled on the original Bulgarian territory." Major General Hoffman's words allowed Marshal Mackensen to find the location of Baku on the map. Looking at Baku, who was separated from Homan and Iasi on the left and right sides of the Suceava German army, Mackensen said plainly, "It seems that our opponent, Admiral Courtois, is a little afraid of our surprise attack." Hoffman nodded in agreement with Mackensen's words. "Yes, Marshal, our opponent is very cautious. This is to put his fist behind him." Then, only by winning Suceava first can we force the opponent to make moves. Marshal, I will give Lieutenant General Gustav an order to take this city as soon as possible. No need for an order. He's already irritated. I can smell his anger from the report. We'll just have to wait now. As you wish. Chapter 332 SUCEAVAN-039 S hard fight? Question mark. Watch out for heavy artillery. A soldier hiding behind the fortifications reminded his comrades in a piercing voice. The comrades who were reminded by him all leaned their bodies against the wall, as if this would allow them to resist the damage of the shells. In fact, they all knew that, as long as the heavy artillery hit their building, everyone present would have no chance of surviving. This experience is a bloody lesson learned by several soldiers defending the same building point, and among the soldiers guarding the building, we can see a familiar face. Mr. Bruno, the border policeman in Suceava, is also here. In the past 2 years, the case of arresting thousands of stowaways in the Nero River caused a sensation in the whole country, and it only brought him a good reputation, and the salary of their team increased by 25 lei every month. Don't think that this reward is too small. You must know that after the news arrived at their police station, their team is about to become the public enemy of the police station ate them. An added bonus is getting his border patrol gear fresh, but still patrolling the border after the outbreak of the war. Bruno and the others were recruited to the newly formed 33rd Division because of their border patrol experience. And he served as the squad leader because he was the captain. The members of one of his squads were basically the border patrol team he brought. This was done in consideration of being able to quickly have combat effectiveness. They and the exception 2 were formed into a platoon from other drafted militia squads, and they were commanded by a young officer who had just graduated urgently from the military academy as the platoon leader in the days before. Their mission was mainly to train soldiers to cover operations, as well as to coordinate operations at the squad level. This is also due to their good marksmanship and other skills, and they need to urgently train others to fill the vacancies. Bruno, who stayed in Suceava to train, also saw the training of other divisions. He saw many troops more than once and only trained in formation and shooting. Of course, it was the first time in their life that these people had touched a gun in their life, and the officers needed to carefully explain to them how to use the rifle. After a month of training like this, the battle arrived with Bruno's rough expectations. It's just that they only heard officers say that the passion of fighting is still glory, but no one told them the cruelty of war. Palak, the best marksman in the patrol, was appointed as a sniper in the company because of his outstanding marksmanship, and he also received a Mosin 98 with a sniper scope. The guns together were hit by artillery in the first battle, not killing a single German. After his former deputy Kamil joined the unit with him, he was transferred to another squad as squad leader because of his commanding ability. However, I heard from someone who knew him 2 days ago that Kamil and his squad were too late to evacuate when they were defending the position. Trapped in the siege of the German army, it is estimated that he was either taken prisoner or already killed. There were Willis, Bol, Katri, Billy, and others, either wounded or killed, or missing. There is only one Luke left who is still alive to fight the border police with his team. The people who were shivering in hiding in the building had been suffering through the shelling time. When it was over, everyone immediately took up guns and took advantage of the terrain to prepare for battle. According to experience, the enemy would come up after the shelling. One more thing to say here, the people who made their faces in the building are all the people in the platoon. The wrong thing to say is that there is also a soldier named Byro that they rescued from other places. Because the company cannot find the position at present, they fight with them. Look, the Germans are coming up on the left. The soldiers who were reconnaissance at the heights loudly told Bruno and the others about the enemy situation they had observed. After hearing the soldiers' report, Bruno immediately ordered, "Doro, stay here. Watch out for possible sneak attacks. Others will come with me." After speaking, Bruno took the lead to move to the left, and all the soldiers, except Dos, followed him. At this time, Bruno skillfully arranged positions for the soldiers behind him. Will, Mick, you two stay behind this low wall. Cheryl, Domi, Raula, the 3 of you are preparing on the right. Minnie, Lang, Hoss, Akachi, the 4 of you are in ambush on the left. Byro, follow me. Everyone took my gunshots as orders to fire. After instructing his soldiers, Bruno found a wall that was broken by the shell and hid, and Byro, who followed him, was very smart, and he found a place to hide on the opposite side. Without making them wait any longer, a small group of German soldiers approached them along the corner. Bruno watched through a small gap open to watch the enemy they were about to engage in fire. This is a German assault team of more than 10 people. By observing the movements and command sign language of these Germans, Bruno felt that these enemies were not simple and were too vigilant. And these people can see from their facial expressions that they are not nervous at all, as if they are at home on the battlefield. Moreover, he actually saw a Madsen machine gun in this team, which further confirmed his idea. This is a tough bone to crack. Maybe they will explain it here. Bruno withdrew his gaze and looked at the photo in the necklace on his chest, which was a group photo of his wife and daughter with him. After this battle, it is very likely that he will never see them again, and Bruno's eyes are a little wet when he thinks of this. Gunshots came from all over the place. This was a fierce battle between the offensive and defensive soldiers. It was a quiet, dilapidated building that was out of tune with the surrounding lively environment. At this time, a large rough hand rested on the wall. This was a strong soldier with a sturdy breath all over his body. From the clothes on his body, we could see that this was a German non-commissioned officer. I saw him carefully observing the situation of the building in front of him, waving his hand to the people behind him to follow. The Romanian soldiers who were hiding around and preparing to raid felt the enemy approaching and couldn't help but hold their breath. The attacking German soldiers slowly spread out into the building on alert, hiding to the side to watch Bruno see the enemy halfway in and slowly find an angle to prepare to shoot. At this moment, the German sergeant who was walking at the front shrank his eyes, and he saw fresh footprints in front of him. Go back, there are enemies. After the German sergeant gave a loud warning, the German soldiers quickly backed away. Bruno, who was ready, cursed inwardly, damn it. Although he didn't know what the enemy said, the enemy's actions obviously found them. At this time, Bruno can't care about other things. If he doesn't destroy some enemies now, then they will be destroyed. Bruno quickly aimed his gun at the German sergeant he had seen. It was he who discovered his whereabouts and made the raid fail, and by observing that he was also one of the commanders of these people, let him be his target. Bruno quickly pulled the trigger from behind the bunker at the running German sergeant. Hearing only a pop, the strong non-commissioned officer had a blood stain on his chest, and then he fell to the ground after running 2 more steps under the force of inertia. After Bruno opened fire, the other soldiers in ambush also opened fire, but because they had been warned, the German soldiers were already prepared, which greatly reduced the attack. Except for the one enemy Bruno killed, the other soldiers killed only 2 soldiers. In addition, a German soldier was wounded, but was also rescued by the enemy. This German squad is also strong. After losing 4 of them, the other soldiers immediately counter-attacked Bruno and others for a while. The 2 sides were fighting with each other, but with the arrival of mutual shooting, the disadvantage of Bruno and others lacking sufficient training was also exposed. In just 15 minutes of shooting, Bruno and the others gave the German soldiers 1 death and 2 injuries at the cost of 3 deaths and 2 injuries as the commander. Bruno felt that he could no longer fight, so he ordered to his comrades, throw the grenades and prepare to evacuate. A new Luke's voice sounded at this time. Captain, my leg is injured and I can't withdraw. You guys go first. A word for my wife and daughter, saying that I love them. Luke's words made Bruno feel sad, but now is not a sad time. He still needs to leave safely with the remaining soldiers. Leave some grenades for Luke. Take care of Luke. We have a chance to see you again. Then Bruno and the others threw grenades and exploded a cloud of smoke that blocked the enemy's sight and immediately started to move. In the face of Bruno and others wanting to leave, the enemy German squad was of course unwilling and immediately prepared to follow and attack, but they were all held back by Luke's fatal attack. Bruno and the others left amid the sound of gunfire in the building, and the sound of gunfire in the building also subsided after a long time. Chapter 333 The Fall of Suceava? Admiral Courtois, who set up his headquarters in Bacoor, has been very anxious recently, and the reason for his anxiety is the telegram for help sent by Major General Antich of Suceava's defensive operations. Major General Antich, who had high hopes for him, sent a rescue telegram on the 9th day of Suceava's defense. In the telegram, Major General Antich reported his results to His Excellency the General. Within 9 days of the defensive operation, the Suceava defenders gave the attacking Germans 24,000 casualties at the expense of their own casualties of 56,000. In this telegram, which was full of reports of his own victory, Antich put his own casualties in the most conspicuous position, obviously hoping that His Excellency the Admiral would notice the huge casualties of the Suceava defenders. The experienced Admiral Courtois could not see Major General Antich's intentions, but Antich's desire to retreat would disrupt the Admiral's plan, and Major General Antich still sent this telegram, even though he knew the Admiral's intentions. It was obvious that he really couldn't stand it, but he was smart enough to use the telegram to report the results of the battle, to propose a retreat plan, which made His Excellency the Admiral very difficult. Therefore, For the sake of prudence, Admiral Courtois expressed his views to others, and Lieutenant General Andrew, who had just been transferred to himself as his deputy, was obviously a suitable person. And he can't stand it anymore in Suceava. I want to ask your opinion. In his office, the white-haired and somewhat tired admiral asked Lieutenant General Anderson, who was sitting across from him. Seeing the tired admiral asking his own question, Lieutenant General Anderson was a little embarrassed, because he had only arrived at Bacoor with the train of the 6th Division for a day, and only had a preliminary understanding of the basic situation. Admiral Courtois now asked himself his opinion on the battle situation, which made him answer, "So, Lieutenant General Anderson, who has thought about it again and again, expresses his opinion. Admiral, I think it is necessary to know whether Major General Antic can continue to fight defensively. If not, then we need to consider the issue of retreating there, and the issue of the enemy's pursuit. Speaking of which, the figure of Marshal Mackensen appeared in Lieutenant General Anderson's mind, and he also had some careful consideration for this prestigious Marshal Anderson. Anderson's words did not give the Admiral much hints, only the old Admiral said with a smile, "Antic sent me a telegram, and kept saying that the German attack had put a lot of pressure on him, obviously wanting reinforcement, or allowing him to retreat. However, it can be seen from the battle at Suceava that we have newly formed a unit. In the face of the German attack, the casualties were very high, and it was difficult to get reinforcement." The Admiral said it very euphemistically. In fact, it is difficult to reinforce the past, but it is impossible to do so, because according to the intelligence, Suceava hides other troops besides the German troops, who are attacking the city. If reinforcement are added, the troops are likely to be defeated halfway. You must know that your opponent is a master of mobile warfare. What about retreating? This is also a problem. Where to withdraw, whether to withdraw, and how to arrange the support troops are all problems. If there is no support for the troops, it will be difficult for the Suceava defenders to escape the German pursuit. If you want to respond, then it becomes the same problem as before. This passive situation was caused by the underestimation of the combat effectiveness of the German army and the overestimation of the combat effectiveness of the mobilization division. This can be seen from his previous battle plan. At the beginning, in order to reduce losses, Admiral Courtois arranged a defender of 100,000 troops in Suceava, trying to make it a fortress city against the German army. But this city, which is equipped with troops and commanders he approves, is now complaining to him in less than 10 days of defense, hoping to evacuate. How can this not make the Admiral panic? According to his plan, the city can be held for a month, and then when the attacking German army is exhausted, he leads the assembled army to force the enemy to evacuate and relieve the siege, or to fight them here. The premise of completing his plan is that the Suceava defenders need to make the enemy tired. But at present, it seems that let alone the enemy is tired, the defenders don't collapse because of too many casualties. Don't think about the tired enemy, so the Admiral is helpless in the face of this situation. Lieutenant General Anderson thought about it. In this case, it is estimated that the only option is to evacuate. Evacuate. Hearing Anderson's words, Admiral Courtois said with a bitter smile, "There is no problem with the evacuation of the defenders in Suceava, but Homan and Iasi, who will face the German attack next, are still a little underprepared." The Admiral asked Lieutenant General Anderson, puzzled, "How is this going?" As the Deputy Chief of Staff, Anderson still had an image of the allocated materials. "I remember that it seemed to be distributed in full. Could it be that there are materials from the transportation department that have not been delivered?" In the face of Anderson's inquiry, Admiral Courtois said the reason. In fact, the materials originally allocated have already arrived, and it was the Admiral who made a new allocation in it. Because of Suceava's important position in the Admiral's plan, many military supplies and weapons that should have been allocated to Homan and Iasi were secretly assigned to Suceava's defenders by the Admiral. Therefore, when the Suceava defenders could not stop the enemy's offensive, now His Excellency the Admiral realized that he had done a stupid thing. After listening to the reason given by Admiral Courtois, Anderson also had a headache. At this moment, he suddenly felt that the Admiral in front of him was getting old, and his thinking couldn't keep up. But this idea just flashed in his mind. This problem is too involved, and it is not something he can talk nonsense as a little lieutenant general. It is what he should do to care about the development of the war situation. Lieutenant General Anderson spoke, after thinking about the gains and losses. Admiral, we can only let Major General Antic evacuate with Suceva's defenders. Why? In the face of Admiral Courtois' question, Anderson explained patiently. According to the Suceava battle report you showed me, I found that the defenders suffered too many casualties. Now we can't mobilize troops to rescue them. In order to prevent a collapse, they can only be evacuated. Hearing Anderson's words, Courtois spoke out about his long-standing anxiety. In this case, the defenders have no way to escape the enemy's pursuit. As a retreating defender, it is basic common sense to be caught up and annihilated by the enemy without any support troops and still in the plain terrain. Obviously Lieutenant General Anderson must have this common sense, and he must have his own considerations for making such a decision. My reason for this is to have the Suceava defenders withdraw to Iasi. Yasi, that's right, it's Iasi. Anderson said his reason to the combat map. It is now obvious that the Suceava defenders can only withdraw in the west and south directions. The west is the Carpathian Mountains and there are still supply points that have not been repaired. The retreat here is basically to bid the defenders farewell to this battle. Then there is the evacuation south, where there are 2 evacuation points, Homan and Iasi. 2 of them are about the same distance, and Homan is the closest to us and can get our support. And Iasi will need to rely on themselves. Anderson's words prompted General Courtois, who took over the words of the Lieutenant General. So the Suceava defenders can't evacuate to us, because Mackinson's target is us, and if they evacuate to us, they will be overtaken. It is much better to evacuate to Iasi, because if they are not in line with them, the enemy will have to divide our troops. In addition, Iasi is the center of our defense against Russia, and there are not many fortifications at all. It is not easy to capture, so evacuation to Iasi is the best result. Yes, Your Excellency. In the face of Admiral Courtois expressing his thoughts, Lieutenant General Anderson recognized it. Actually, I think more about this idea. The enemy attaches great importance to barbecue Wu troops. If they don't pay attention, then they can only rely on the command ability of Major General Antic. But we are going to take a gamble. The telegram allowing the evacuation was soon sent to Suceava, and the defenders of Suceava, who were exhausted from defending the German attack, were relieved. The huge casualties had long overwhelmed the defenders, and now they could finally evacuate. So after 10 days of defending Suceava, the defenders withdrew in the direction of Iasi under the leadership of Major General Antic. The Germans who captured Suceava immediately reported to Marshal Mackinson whether to allow the pursuit of the defeated enemy. There is no need to chase. After this period of battle, the enemy's mobilizers are not a big threat to us. As long as they dare to leave the turtle shell, they can be cleaned up by us like fallen leaves, Marshal Mackinson said, while looking at the location of Baku on the map. On the contrary, the troops assembled here are the elite of the Romanians. Only by defeating them can the enemy's will to fight be defeated. https. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website. Chapter 334 Bulgarian Campaign. 1. The German army took only 10 days to capture the military town of Suceava, and the news of the defeat of the defenders spread to everyone's ears like the wind. This news saved a lot for the Allies, because the unfavorable factors brought about by the loss of Transylvania also surprised Edel, who had been keeping an eye on the situation. Your Majesty, Admiral Courtois has sent a telegram to explain the failure of this battle. The main problem is that we have underestimated the enemy, and we have some inadequacies in the use of mobilization divisions in a room of the Royal Palace. Admiral Pleshin was explaining to Edel the gains and losses of the Battle of Suceava. Aside from His Majesty Edel, who can listen to the report of the Chief of General Staff, only Prime Minister Bricianu has this qualification. Facing Prezhan's explanation, Edel can accept that no one can win every battle, but there is still some strangeness in his heart. So what are you going to do next? The strangeness in his heart did not affect Edel, and now he is concerned about the military's next response to this in the face of the king's inquiry. Prezhan immediately took out the solution that he and Admiral Courtois had already researched. Your Majesty, we have some insights on the German army's next battle plan. If nothing is expected, then their next target must be Homan, and we intend to use this city to slow the enemy's footsteps. The specific response measures are: let the 6th and 16th divisions that have already arrived rush to Homan as the core of our defense. Let the mobilization divisions that have gathered here be the support to slow the enemy's footsteps and then fight the enemy's war of attrition here. Hearing the military's negative battle plan, Prime Minister Bricianu knew that, even if he didn't know much about the military, he was going to temporarily give up the territory occupied by the German army. Thinking of the people in these territories, Bricianu couldn't help but ask, as the head of the government, then you didn't have a plan to counterattack? Yes, but it doesn't work. Presson knew what the Prime Minister meant by this question. But the problems exposed by the Battle of Suceava prevented him from coming up with a way to keep the Germans at the border. That is the sentence: that the troops are insufficient and the elite troops that can fight are too few. As a country with a population of 10 million, Romania can guarantee that 400,000 well-trained soldiers have done their best. As in history, Romania had only 130,000 troops before the war, and it still lacked guns and artillery. Under the leadership of the foresighted Edel, being able to have a well-trained army of 400,000 before the war is also a reflection of his ability. But under the more severe circumstances of the outbreak of this war, in history, Romania has participated in the war and Russia has relied on it. Preshan had to make a choice. Transylvania is too important to lose, and the Bulgarian campaign is more important for Romania to change the external environment, so it can only use the second line mobilization of soldiers in the German elite to fight. These second line soldiers showed in the Suceava operation that their combat effectiveness was far from the German army. Then the best way to use them is to use the fortifications to fight against the German army, and it is necessary to have standing divisions as support. This is also the lesson learned from the Suceava battle. Moreover, in the hearts of the military such as Preshan, the German commander, Marshal Mackensen, is also a figure that makes them fearful, not to dare to use some extreme tactics, for fear of being caught by loopholes and making the battle uncontrollable. Therefore, in the plan formulated by Preshan and others, they have always emphasized steady fighting, which is also a reflection of the rigidity of the Romanian army in Moldavia. In the face of Preshan, Edel knew that this was the most appropriate solution for the military at present, so he could only support it. Thinking of this, Edel turned to look at the Prime Minister and asked, "Is there any support your government can give to the military?" Edel's words made Presson look at the Prime Minister expectantly. Prime Minister Bricianu, who was concerned, was stunned. He knew that this was the king's intention, to ask the government to increase its support for the military. Thinking of this, he felt anguish in his heart, and he knew that participating in this secret meeting would not have a good result, and it was verified. It seems that I have to show the sincerity of the government and sort out what other things the government has that the military can take a fancy to. Your Majesty, we plan to organize some celebrities and well-known entertainers to come to the front line to offer condolences and then launch the public's war donations. The other is to let the government vigorously promote the patriotic movement and cooperate with the army's recruitment work. Prime Minister Bricianu said various government measures from his mouth, while Edel and Preshan were still listening quietly. Even after the Prime Minister finished speaking, no one answered, which made Prime Minister Bricianu feel a little discouraged. It seems that these cannot satisfy the appetite of the two in front of him. Thinking of this, the Prime Minister decided to use a tactic of killing 1,000 enemies and losing 800. Our government can still issue another war debt. Prime Minister Bricianu said to pause here and looked at Edel and asked meaningfully, "Your Majesty, do you think the figure of 1 billion lei is reasonable?" Edel, who was asked by the Prime Minister, couldn't help but be a little stunned. He didn't expect that the Prime Minister was so bold that he actually had the idea of the royal family. And Pulishan's eyes lit up when he heard this, and he couldn't help but look at the king. Edel, who was watching the two of them, felt a little like shooting himself in the foot. He didn't expect the chief of staff to be a traitor in front of 1 billion lei. Cough. Is this a bit too much? Unwilling, Edel couldn't help bargaining with the Prime Minister. Because the war bond royal family has bought no less than twice the amount spent, has reached 1.2 billion lei. It can be said that 40% of Romanian war bonds were purchased by the royal family. Your Majesty, this is not much at all. Edel said the reduction of the quota, and before the Prime Minister could answer, the Chief of General Staff took it. Now we spend a lot of money, and the newly occupied Transylvania needs a lot of money. And we are fighting in 3 directions, and these materials and ammunition are not less at all. And we also need to recruit troops, to supplement the losses on all fronts. Training costs, armament equipment, etc. all need to be spent. In addition, in Moldavia, there are also various tasks such as building fortifications and helping refugees. After he finished speaking, Ploiesti looked at Edel eagerly, and he was a little embarrassed to see him point. Well, the government is issuing war bonds of 1 billion lei, but this is the last time. Facing Edel's agreement to issue bonds, both of them nodded quickly. It is pitiful to say that as a government that issues war bonds, it should put the people who buy it on the people. Why is it so obsessed with the royal family? The reason is simple. Romania's previous economic boom relied on the needs of the Allies, and now the war with the Allies has disrupted the desire of capitalists who want to continue making money. So war debt is not easy to sell among these people. Without the purchase of capitalists, it is impossible to rely on the savings of ordinary people's weibo. So as the richest royal family, it must fill this gap. After Edel agreed to pay, he told Ploiesti a little worried about the war situation. Regarding the Bulgarian campaign, you need to prepare as soon as possible, and you cannot let us face 3 enemies alone. Please rest assured, Your Majesty, I have already sent a telegram to Lieutenant General Farit, and I believe the battle will begin soon. Chapter 335 Bulgarian Campaign 2. In Suman, a city not far from Bulgaria's existing border, a large number of soldiers flooded the city. Residents in the city have become accustomed to this. Since the outbreak of the war more than a month ago, there have been many soldiers in Suman city. They built sandbags, built bunkers, and pulled barbed wire here. At that time, many people felt that this place was going to be a battlefield, and some people were scared to flee to the countryside. As a result, nothing happened, but recently there have been more and more soldiers, which made many people speculate whether they are going to use force against Bulgaria next door. In fact, there are not only soldiers stationed in the city of Suman, but there are many soldiers stationed in Varna and Rus, but there is no Sumando. The reason for this situation is that the headquarters of the Bulgarian Combat Army was also established in Suman. And the headquarters, Fleet, who had just taken office as a new officer, was making his last preparations before the war. Everyone, the target of our operation is very clear. That is, Sofia, the capital of the enemy. According to the information we have learned, Bulgaria has formed a new 6th army as a response, with a force of 180,000 people, and the commander is cunning. Lieutenant General. Looking at the commanders who were sitting quietly below and listening to his own tactics, Farit lamented that he was one of them once, and that he had a chance to stand out in the Balkan War. After a sigh, Farit continued to speak. This 6th army is currently stationed in Veliko Tarnovo, Pleven and Norik, completely blocking our army's attack on Sofia. So according to the army's operational plan, the 3rd and 7th divisions are stationed in Rus. As the vanguard, they will conduct tentative attacks on the enemy in Veliko Tarnovo. Lieutenant General Mandive, the commander of the 3 divisions, is in charge. The left wing is in charge of the 12th division, the right wing is in charge of the 2nd Imperial Guard division, and the other divisions follow the command. Then Lieutenant General Fried continued to talk about some key points and precautions for the battle one after another. The entire conference room was quiet, and all the generals who participated in the meeting were carefully taking notes and recording their tasks. Okay, let's go. As Lieutenant General Farit, who presided over the meeting, sounded the end of the meeting, the door that had been pressing for more than 2 hours was pushed open, and the generals with the generals on their shoulders walked out of the conference room one after another. Lieutenant General Farit, who was in charge of presiding over the meeting, and Major General Solder, the Chief of Staff, finally walked out. Commander, Chief of Staff, this is a new plan for the construction of the fortifications in Veliko Tarnovo and Pleven. A staff officer spoke to the two with a document. Before Lieutenant General Farit reached out his hand, Chief of Staff Solder reached out and took it. Give it to me first. Fried was also not surprised by the actions of the chief of staff. Speak directly. The intelligence department has made a lot of contributions this time, and even got the distribution map of the fortifications. I think I must also give them credit. I just don't know which department took the credit. In the face of the chief of staff's inquiry, Lieutenant General Farid, who knew some intelligence departments, said with a smile, "That's what you need to ask Milican Karist's captain." Then the lieutenant general changed the subject. "Look at others first to find out about Bulgaria's domestic situation and troop deployment, and then to find out the fortification defense map. They have already paved the way for us. If the mission fails, there is really nothing to say." In the face of Lieutenant General Friet's words, Major General Zelda nodded in agreement. Our group army is the most elite, almost all standing divisions, and 2 of the 3 major ace divisions have come. There is no reason why they can't win the opponent. Facing the words of the chief of staff, Lieutenant General Friet said something else. "I heard that the Battle of Thessaloniki has stopped. Yes, the Allies have sent a telegram saying that their losses are too great and the Battle of Salonika is about to go on. However, the chief of the general staff has sent them a note requesting that the Allies must continue this battle. It is related to the opening of our external channels." The chief of staff's words made Falit grumble. "These people from the allied countries are really fighting too badly. Didn't we find out clearly? Bulgaria has about 200,000 elites, and the others are not as good as a second batch of mobilization divisions. These allied forces can't be open." In the face of his partner's complaints, Major General Zelda said with a wry smile, "It's not that you don't know the situation. The environment in Thessaloniki is not good, and it is said that there are 500,000 allied troops, but in fact most of them are composed of Serbian and Greek troops. We all know the Serbian army and the performance of the Greek army." "Oops, don't you know?" The chief of staff's words reminded Farid of the performance of the Greek army in the Balkan War, which really can't be expected too much. Then the chief of staff's voice rang again. "And the few British and French troops left, most of them are colonial soldiers. Their abilities are not comparable to the local soldiers. The only ones who are better are the Australian and New Zealand soldiers. And I heard that this attack is the Australian and New Zealand soldiers. New soldiers and Serbian soldiers as the main force." The words of the chief of staff made Lieutenant General Friet think. It is better for the allied forces to continue the Battle of Thessaloniki, even if the offensive intensity is a little lower. This can consume the few materials in Bulgaria's reserves. According to the information, the Bulgarians are about to run out of food. In the face of Lieutenant General Friet's question, the chief of staff helped him recall. "Yes, according to intelligence, 42% of Bulgaria is currently lacking food." Lieutenant General Farid said disdainfully. "It's no wonder that only 6 million people dare to recruit soldiers in their early 100s. They are not short of food." Yes, Farid is right. Bulgaria has the highest mobilization rate among the participating countries, and its 18% mobilization rate far exceeds that of other countries. However, Bulgaria mobilized so many soldiers, but did not have enough ordnance to equip them. Many divisions lacked guns and artillery, and there were even rifle divisions before the Allies did not pay much attention to Bulgaria, because it was too far from the main battlefield. It is different now that Romania joins, except that Russia is defeated and faced with the Free German and Austrian army. Britain, France, Italy and other countries pay more attention to the Western Front and the Italian battlefield. As for the situation in the Balkans, we can only wait for Britain and France to block the German attack. Now the Battle of Thessaloniki is their biggest support for Romania. Lieutenant General Friet, who knew this clearly, said to the Chief of Staff, "This time our battle will not only defeat the enemy militarily, but also disintegrate them in terms of people's livelihood. For this reason, the General Staff has asked the government to prepare 40,000 tons of grain. This is also our ammunition, the ammunition for the Bulgarian people." Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, chapter 336 Bulgarian campaign, 3. In the second month after the declaration of war, the Bulgarian campaign, which worried both Romania and the Allies, finally began. The 3rd and 7th Divisions from Rus acted as the vanguard and took the lead point under the crushing of superior troops and equipment. They took the lead in capturing the border city of Kamenn. This border city, 40 kilometers from Rus, 50 kilometers from Lumen, and 45 kilometers from Veliko Tarnovo, was defended by only one militia regiment. As the forward commander, Lieutenant General Mandive only arranged a brigade-level assault and won the first battle point standing in the empty Kamenn city hall looking at the messy ground. Lieutenant General Mandive instructed the staff around him, "Report to the commander that we have taken Kamenn and failed to meet the enemy's resistance point." The young communications staff officer asked in confusion, "Sir, didn't we encounter resistance outside the city?" In the face of the staff's questions, Lieutenant General Mandive said with disdain, "Can a battle that breaks down after charging be called resistance?" After speaking, Division Commander Mandive ignored the little staff officer and wanted to say it to a general wearing the rank of Major General beside him. "Major General Fochter, I will lead the 3rd Division to go first, and your 7th Division will follow. We will meet outside the city of Veliko Tarnovo point." Major General Fochter was a little surprised by Lieutenant General Mandive's words, and he couldn't help but say it. "It's very likely to be dangerous." "It's not very dangerous." Mandive opened his mouth to express his plans. "The enemy even gave up on Kamenns. It must be shrinking its forces to defend Veliko Tarnovo. It is impossible to have a defense line behind. So I bet that there will be no major enemies along the way from here to Veliko Tarnovo military point." In the face of the confident Mandive, Major General Fochter could not dissuade him anymore. After all, the vanguard's commander is also the other side. "Well, you go first. I'll leave a battalion to support the army, and I'll follow point." Seeing that Fochter agreed to his actions, Lieutenant General Mandive immediately went to prepare for the 3 divisions to conduct military operations. In fact, Lieutenant General Mandive still had a careful thought in his heart. He planned to use the forward position of the 3rd Division to lure the Bulgarian army to attack, and then give the army a chance to eat the enemy. The incentive for him to have this idea was Lieutenant General Ankada of the 1st Guards Division. Everyone was jealous of the benefits obtained by the 1st Guards Division commander after that battle, so he also wanted to try it out. Then the 3rd Division, led by Lieutenant General Mandive, began to march towards Veliko Tarnovo, while the 7th Division started to move half a day later. Lieutenant General Kudinchev, the Bulgarian commander who had been following the war situation, quickly knew about this trend, but he was not at all concerned when he was in Veliko Tarnovo point with the latest information of the Romanian army in his hand, speaking disdainfully. "This kind of trick can be used to embarrass people." Hearing the commander's words, several Bulgarian division commanders gathered in the headquarters also spoke up. "Lieutenant General, should we give them some color to see? We can send small units to take advantage of the familiar terrain and harass their march." "Lieutenant General, we." Seeing that he was talking about his advice to the Taoist teachers, Lieutenant General Kudinchev raised his hand and signaled to listen to him. "As you all know, in Thessaloniki we have been at war with the enemy for a month, and it is very draining. And at the moment, it seems that we have no possibility of drawing troops from the front line of Thessaloniki, so now we are assisting the Romanians, the only army. I cannot risk putting the country in any danger for this." Lieutenant General Kudinchev's words. The division commanders who were present knew that they were Bulgaria's last capital, and if they lost, they would withdraw from the battle point. After waiting for the division commander to digest these words, Lieutenant General Kudinchev immediately stated his battle plan. "And according to my plan, Veliko Tarnovo and Norwich will gradually resist and then be abandoned. We will lengthen the enemy's supply line. Finally, in Provin, we will block the enemy's attack, and then it will be time for us to counterattack. If the city is abandoned like this, what will the people do?" Faced with questions, Lieutenant General Kudinchev answered, "I will organize the evacuation of personnel and materials, among which young adults, women, and children will be the priority evacuation targets." In the face of Lieutenant General Kudinchev's words, none of the teachers present were moral people and knew that this was the best way. It is the most sensible way to evacuate the supplies and useful personnel and leave the elderly who lack food and clothing to increase their supply pressure, but they are more or less blocked in their hearts. After all, they are both human and not machines, and they all have feelings. who makes Bulgaria's materials tight now. In fact, Bulgaria is the country with the most shortage of materials in the alliance. Over the years, 1 million troops have already overwhelmed this country, which is not known for its mountains and grain production. Even starting from last year, the Bulgarian military sent a group of soldiers back to help with farming and harvesting during the early busy farming season. However, these still cannot solve the problem of food and clothing for the people, and a large number of old and weak still die due to various injuries and diseases caused by starvation. Its domestic civil grievances have made Bulgaria somewhat unable to suppress, but relying on a strong patriotic national plot can barely maintain. Glancing at the teachers in front of him, Lieutenant General Kudinchev continued. The next thing we have to do is to stop the Romanians from attacking for the people. Then someone asked, what if it can't be stopped? Then ensure your strength and keep it for the next counterattack. Seeing the teacher who had calmed down and the atmosphere was a little low, Lieutenant General Kudinchev knew that it was his own words, so he remedied it. I have discussed with the commander-in-chief before this. As long as we resist the attack of the allied forces outside the city of Thessaloniki, he will send reinforcement. The commander-in-chief that Lieutenant General Kudinchev said was not Ferdinand I, who was traditionally served by the king, but Admiral Zhekov. Admiral Zhekov, whose full name is Nikolai Zhekov, was born in Sliven in 1865. He was a graduate of the Sofia Military School and volunteered for the Reserve Corps during the Serbian-Bulgarian War of 1885. In 1886 he took part in a military coup against Alexander. After the plot failed, he was demoted to cadet and sent to the 12th Infantry Regiment. Soon, he received an amnesty and graduated from the military academy. In 1887 he was promoted to lieutenant and assigned to Schumann's 2nd Artillery Regiment. In 1894 he was promoted to captain and sent to Italy, where he graduated from the military academy in Turin in 1898. After returning to Bulgaria, he served in the 3rd Artillery Regiment and Army Staff. In 1901 he was promoted to major and taught at the Sofia Military School, where he became headmaster in 1912. During this period he gained the trust of King Ferdinand I, and from 1910 to 1912 he also served as commander of the 1st Infantry Regiment. During the First Balkan War, Colonel Zhekov served as Chief of Staff of the 2nd Army and was responsible for the initial siege of Edirne. Later, he led a team to raid the fortress of Edirne and made military exploits. He was unable to participate in the Second Balkan War due to illness, and after the war he was appointed commander of the Bulgarian Thracian forces. After the Balkan Wars, King Ferdinand I refused to continue commanding the Bulgarian army as commander-in-chief and supported Nikolai Zhekov in this post. Zhekov supported Bulgaria in the war with the Allies, so when he decided to join the war, he assumed the post of commander-in-chief on September 24, 1915. After taking over the post of commander-in-chief, Zhekov tried his best to solve the problems of the bloated command of the Bulgarian army and the lack of materials. He performed very well, not only reducing the headquarters personnel to replenish the grassroots troops, but also allowing Germany and Austria-Hungary to give no less than assistance. Moreover, he paid attention to the morale of the soldiers and went to the grassroots company many times to understand the situation, which was deeply loved by the soldiers. In addition, he also made a lot of credit in the battle against Serbia. One more thing to say here, when the original Time and Space Romania joined the war, he also led the Bulgarian army to join the army group led by Marshal Mackensen and performed quite well in the capture of Romania. Therefore, after Lieutenant General Kudinchev said that he had discussed with Admiral Zhekov, the division commanders present were relieved. It's just that they need to face it seriously in the next battle. With the Romanian army who defeated Bulgaria and pulled it out of the war, it is up to them whether they can stop it or not. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, chapter 337 Bulgarian campaign, 4, ? Retreat. A Bulgarian officer loudly ordered his soldiers to evacuate after seeing Romanian soldiers approaching. Long live. Seeing the figure of the Bulgarian soldiers retreating, the Romanian soldiers who had just occupied the enemy's position cheered loudly. The retreat of the enemy made everyone less injured. It was a happy thing. The soldiers cheered and vented to relieve the tension of the previous battle point. Different from the excitement of the soldiers, the officer in charge of leading the team felt a little different. What happened to these Bulgarians? Retreating again. Officers are different from soldiers and feel the difference in combat point. It's really different. Compared with the performance of the Balkan War a few years ago, the Bulgarian soldiers here are not tenacious enough. An officer who had fought in the Balkan Wars spoke up to say the difference. The officers could feel the difference in the Bulgarian army, and of course Lieutenant General Feritas commanding them. Standing in the city of Veliko Tarnovo, which was once again captured by Romania, he immediately felt different. When he counted the seized list, he confirmed his thoughts. Looking at the few seized lists, Felit said to himself with a smile, "This is a plan to resist and lengthen our supply line. Kudinchev, are you underestimating me too much?" After Felit finished speaking, he called a staff officer, sent a telegram to Lieutenant General Mandive, Major General Derimitu, and Major General Fokta, asking them to take their troops lightly into battle and immediately attack the retreating enemy. "I want the Bulgarian army to be unable to escape." Okay, Your Excellency. Commander looking at the staff officer who had left to send the telegram, Felit once again observed the combat map. "I'll let the 3 divisions pester you to see how you can evacuate calmly. If you want to get a bargain from me, I want you to leave something behind." Following Lieutenant General Friet's order, the 2nd, 3rd, and 7th divisions of the Imperial Guard immediately accelerated. They put down their heavy packages and pursued the evacuated Bulgarian soldiers with nothing but weapons, ammunition and several days' worth of rations in the face of a light-loaded pursuit. The effect is very obvious. It only took a day for a slow retreating Bulgarian army to evacuate with the people and was caught up. No, the Romanians are here. A soldier in charge of reconnaissance hurriedly caught up with the retreating huge team, brought the bad news to the team commander. The commander who served as the head of the regiment and was responsible for protecting the evacuation of the people immediately asked, "How many enemies are there?" Faced with the inquiries of the regiment commander, the scout soldiers stated what they had observed. "I saw the darkness from a distance, at least 5,000 people." The soldier's words made the head of the regiment feel a little stunned. The enemy was coming from at least 1 brigade. "I heard that there is an enemy approaching." At this time, the regiment chief of staff who got the news also rushed over. Yes, the head of the regiment informed him of the results of the investigation, and the chief of staff was also taken aback when he heard that at least 1 brigade's enemy was approaching. Then what should we do? Is to stay on the defensive immediately or hide with the people? It's useless to hide. There are tens of thousands of people here. It's impossible to hide. Now you can only resist or evacuate. The chief of staff was also a little surprised when the head of the regiment retorted in "If they resist, they will attack the enemy in 1 regiment and 1 brigade, and this battle will be difficult to fight. Not to mention that the enemy is likely to have reinforcement, and he can only have these soldiers in front of him. If they evacuate, then the people in front of them can be said to be basically abandoned. After all, if they evacuate at full speed, no one will care about them." As a soldier who abandoned the protection of the people, this made it difficult for the two of them to accept. Just when the two were entangled, another news came. The enemy has reached the village of Waldland, 5 kilometers away. A panting soldier returned with worse news. The news made the chief of staff jump a little anxiously. "Now we can't wait. The decision to leave or stay must be made immediately." Facing the urging of the chief of staff, the head of the regiment finally prevailed rationally. "Immediately order the troops to move forward at full speed and tell the people to find a path to move forward if they can't keep up with the troops." When the command of the regiment commander was conveyed, the people who followed were agitated. There are wails of women and children everywhere because at this moment they know they have been abandoned. In the face of the coming ruthless Romanians, most of the old and weak, women and children ran to both sides, and they planned to leave the large army to give themselves a chance to avoid the brutal enemy. At this time, it can be seen from a distance that the crowd gathered is divided into many groups. Nearly half of them are leaving the army, and only the young and middle-aged are still behind the army. More than 10 minutes later, the Romanian pursuers arrived here. Seeing that items were thrown everywhere because of panic, the figures of the people who were fleeing in the distance were still looming. The officer who led the team ordered directly Never mind these Bulgarians, we chase the enemy deserters. This happened more than once. In fact, it happened to the troops evacuating with the people on the road from Veliko Tarnovo to Norwich and Pleven. How could the Bulgarian soldiers who led the evacuation of the people escape the Romanian troops who were chasing lightly? Several retreating Bulgarian soldiers were overtaken by the Romanian army. There were lucky ones who escaped, and those who were unlucky who were wiped out on the spot. Faced with this situation, Lieutenant General Kudinchev, as the commander, was quite angry. These goddamn Romanians, who are they looking down on? Faced with the anger of the Lieutenant General, the Chief of Staff, who also knew the situation, asked, "What should we do now? What else can we do?" Of course, let the army withdraw first. The decision to let the army lead the people to withdraw before is simply terrible. Although Lieutenant General Kudinchev was very angry, he really understood the situation very thoroughly. Don't look at the fact that there are only 3 Romanian divisions entangled with him now. As long as he wants to take action against them, the Romanian troops behind him will immediately rush forward, and these 3 divisions will also try their best to hold him back. This is a trap set for him, and he is not so stupid to jump into it. Soon Lieutenant General Kudinchev's order was conveyed to the retreating divisions. Except for the troops approaching Pleven, the other divisions gave up the retreat with the people and evacuated individually. Such a decision may seem inhumane, but it is the best option for the Bulgarian army. As the Bulgarian soldiers speed up their pace, the news of being caught up by Romania is becoming less and less, and many times the Bulgarian soldiers who have put down their burdens can reinforce their teammates, so that they have no chance. In the end, the Romanian soldiers could not find an opportunity, and could only watch the Bulgarian soldiers retreat to their destination. But both sides know that this is just a warm-up before the war, and at some point next, they will both fight for the future of their homeland. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 338, Bulgarian Campaign 5? After the Bulgarian army led by Lieutenant General Kudinchev retreated to Pleven, it was preparing for the defense. Lieutenant General Ferit, who was chasing, also delayed the march after hearing that the Bulgarian army was entrenched in Pleven, and he wanted to make final preparations for the capture of Pleven. The reason why Lieutenant General Ferit was so cautious, in addition to the large number of Bulgarian troops gathered in Pleven, was also the key to the construction of the local fortifications since ancient times. Pleven has been used as a major communication link between Bulgaria and Romania. There are still traces left by various eras inside and outside the city. Of course, as a major transportation route, the defense against possible enemy attacks is also under consideration. For this reason, Pleven has experienced many wars in history and has been destroyed 3 times in it. However, it was later rebuilt by relying on prosperous trade. Thanks to its location in the interior of Bulgaria, Pleven has not suffered from war in these years. The most recent moment was the attack of Romania in the Second Balkan War. But that time, due to the change of situation, Pleven was not attacked either. But the Bulgarians have also built a number of fortifications since then, as a strategic point, to defend against their increasingly powerful neighbors to the north, and now is the time to use them. As the commander who commanded the Romanian army to attack Bulgaria, Lieutenant General Ferit was of course aware of this, so he was gathering his own strength to break this hard wall nut. The most advantageous weapon in his hands to conquer the city is the 2 heavy artillery regiments assigned to him, a 150 heavy artillery regiment and a 210 heavy artillery regiment. Among them, the 210th heavy artillery regiment was temporarily expedited because the Romanian military found that large caliber heavy artillery was the most effective in the face of enemy fortifications after the Battle of Suceava. So in the face of the Bulgarian army gathered in the defense of Pleven, Lieutenant General Ferit prepared to use his most powerful weapons, while Lieutenant General Ferit was waiting for his heavy artillery. Lieutenant General Kudinchev was also strengthening the fortifications inside and outside the city. At the same time, the two of them are also constantly making small moves, arranging troops to harass the supply line, to force the Romanian army to disperse its troops, which is the due meaning of Lieutenant General Kudinchev as the commander. It is not surprising that Fleet arranged for a small number of elite soldiers to bypass Pleven and harass the back of the defenders. So today I'm raiding your transport convoy, and tomorrow I'm raiding the quarters behind you, which happens frequently before the battle. But both of them knew that these were not effective means to defeat their opponents. Only in the head-to-head offensive and defensive battle in Previn was the focus of the two sides. Time is so frequent and stressful. After a week of confrontation, the heavy artillery that Lieutenant General Fried had been waiting for finally arrived. So on the second day of this 1918, the Romanian army was finally ready to attack. A small village called Petrol, 6 kilometers outside the city of Pleven, is already filled with Romanian soldiers, and the local Bulgarians have fled the village. In the open space outside the village, a heavy artillery with its muzzle lifted and its gun jacket removed, as well as artillerymen preparing for the war. Let people know that this is a heavy artillery position in Romania. Among them, the slender large caliber cannon and the stubby howitzer can be seen here. For heavy artillery positions like Petrol, Lieutenant General Ferit has prepared 4 places, and they will be heavy hammers against the tortoise shell of Pleven Point. When the needle pointed to 9 o'clock, the heavy artillery that had already set up its firing parameters was ready to fire. Boom, boom, boom. The rapidly falling artillery shells bombarded the well-prepared positions in Bulgaria, and a lot of painstaking fortifications failed to withstand the bombardment of heavy artillery and turned into dust. The Bulgarian soldiers hiding in the fortifications shivered under the lewd power of the god of war. This made the Romanian soldiers who were in the position waiting to attack look at ease. When the superior artillery fire swept the enemy's position, everyone was so excited. Look, there was a big explosion over there. It should be that the position where the ammunition was stored was directly hit. The explosion of a frontline ammunition warehouse caused by the hit made the soldiers discuss with excitement. I saw the barrels were blown off. I also saw machine guns blown off. Seeing the soldiers having heated discussions, the lower level officers in charge of leading the team did not step forward to stop them. Talking before the war helped ease their nervousness faced with the heavy artillery bombardment of Romania. The defenders of course would not remain indifferent, and they also used their own heavy artillery to counter it. Howl. A sharp voice came from far to near. This voice greatly changed the complexion of the experienced officers and soldiers. Hide quickly, there is artillery bombardment. Boom. An artillery shell landed more than 10 meters in front of the starting position, making the soldiers who had been discussing heatedly before become disgraced. Damn, these Bulgarians are not going to get any better. What about our artillery? Kill those who dare to fight back against Bulgarian chops. Seeing their embarrassed appearance, the soldiers denounced them again and again, hoping that their artilleryman would teach them a lesson. To these embarrassed enemies, in order not to disappoint them, he had air supremacy and set up the artillery brothers of the artillery school hot air balloon, and soon hit the cannonballs on the enemy artillery that dared to show his face. In the face of Romania's counter-artillery shelling, the artillery on the defending side was scattered and evaded, and all that could not be avoided were turned into parts under the bombardment of the heavy artillery regiment. This also relieved the artillery shelling suffered by the Romanian soldiers on the position, and also reduced the damage suffered by the shelled Bulgarian positions, which also became the goal of the defensive side. After 2 hours of heavy artillery shelling, the Bulgarians' positions were in disarray, the fortifications were almost flattened, and it looked like a pitch-dark lunar surface full of craters. Seeing this, the officers who led the team waved their arms and shouted loudly, "Attack!" The soldiers on the starting position were also very morale and immediately followed their commander and rushed towards the enemy. Looking from the sky, it seemed as if the army green tide was about to drown the opponent. The Bulgarian soldiers, who were shaking their heads and feeling dazed at the positions that had been abused by Romanian heavy artillery, changed their expressions greatly when they saw this situation. Get ready to fight back. The officers among them immediately and eagerly issued orders to their soldiers. There are not many enemies, so hurry up and seize the position. The sparse sound of gunfire on the position did not stop the soldiers from attacking, but boosted their morale. This situation also made Major General Fochter, who was in charge of commanding the battle, overjoyed, and he directly ordered the staff by the pillow. Let the artillery immediately increase the interception firepower, and must not let the enemy reinforcement come up. I want to take the enemy's forward positions in this battle point under the order of Major General Fochter. The already fierce artillery fire was a little more urgent. This made it impossible for the Bulgarian soldiers who reinforced the front line to pass, and it also made the Bulgarian commander in charge of defense jump with anger led by officers. They charged into the shattered positions with few casualties, and engaged in close firefights with the enemy. Without the addition of reinforcement, the defenders on the position were driven out one by one, much to the satisfaction of Major General Fochter, who was in charge of commanding the battle point. Send a message to Lieutenant General Farid. Our army has won the forward position in the first battle. The enemy army has been defeated and retreated to the rear, requesting instructions for the next step. Soon Lieutenant General Farid's receipt came to him, and there was only one sentence. I hope to make persistent efforts in the future to attack the defense line of the enemy in front of you. The words of Lieutenant General Farid greatly satisfied Major General Fochter, and he called in the communications staff to continue giving orders. Let the rear artillery prepare. We will continue to attack the enemy's positions in the afternoon, and we cannot give the enemy a chance to breathe. In the next battle, the Romanian army used its artillery and soldiers to occupy an absolute advantage, and launched a fierce attack on the defending Bulgarian positions one after another. Heavy artillery bombardment of infantry occupation. This set of tactics that let the Romanians themselves face the German army in Suceava suffered a big loss, and it is just as easy to use on the Bulgarians. Although Romania's heavy artillery was not as numerous and large as the German army, the Bulgarian fortifications were not as strong as those built by Romania. As Bulgaria, whose national strength is not as strong as its opponent, it is not realistic to build Pleven into a solid fortress composed of reinforced concrete. Most of the fortifications outside the city are mainly based on civil works, and only a few key defense points, hidden military holes, and ammunition storage points are reinforced with reinforced concrete. And the fortifications in the city can only be simply reinforced with a large number of dwellings, and only a few points are built according to the standard of standing fortifications. Most of these fortifications cannot be resisted under heavy artillery bombardment. Facing the non-stop onslaught of the Romanian army, Lieutenant General Kudinchev, who was in command, complained repeatedly. After a week of onslaught without leaving his hands, he finally couldn't bear it, and asked the Bulgarian Commander-in-Chief Admiral Zekov for help. In the telegram for help, Lieutenant General Kudinchev said, "If there is no reinforcement within 10 days, then it will be impossible to resist the enemy's offensive." In the face of Lieutenant General Kudinchev's request for help, Admiral Zekov was greatly surprised, so he could only find a way to draw troops from the front line of Thessaloniki, which turned the Bulgarian campaign into a turning point. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, chapter 339 Bulgarian campaign. ? On the Salonika front, where Bulgaria and the Allies fought, the Allied soldiers retreated to their positions like a tide. Seeing the retreating Allied soldiers, the defending Bulgarian soldiers cheered their victory loudly. At the same time, several agile soldiers took out their positions and carefully turned their pockets on the fallen soldiers of the enemy, looking for useful things. The actions of these soldiers did not attract the attention of both parties at all. It has been more than a year for them to take it seriously. The Allies were a little annoyed by this at first, and used artillery to bombard the corpses. But the effect was not great. They continued to do this after the sound of the guns stopped, which made the Allies lose their temper, and could only let themselves go. They also knew that these Bulgarians were looking for property, so they all told the soldiers not to take valuables with them, but it was of little use. For soldiers facing life and death, it is safer to carry them by themselves, if they do not carry them in the military camp, and be stolen. Yes, the Allied army, which consists of hundreds of thousands of troops from many countries, is not very safe in the barracks outside Thessaloniki. The main reason is that the personnel are too complicated. There are soldiers from the British and French mainland, soldiers from the Balkans, from Greece and Serbia, black soldiers from Africa with original flavor, and Indian soldiers with curry flavor. Basically, the whole world. You can find all races here. People from all over the world gather together and mix all kinds of customs, so as long as these Bulgarian soldiers don't get close to their positions, the Allied soldiers will not go back to them. It's just that the Bulgarian soldiers were a little presumptuous during this time, and they all touched the center line. This made the Allied countries a little unhappy, and they planned to give them some color. The Allied officers and soldiers hiding in ambush not far from the trenches watched the Bulgarian soldiers rummaging in the battlefield, getting closer to the center line. Under the command of the leading officer to fire, he immediately raised the rifle in his hand to shoot at the enemies who were looking for the corpses. Crack crack point. The sudden sound of gunfire on the battlefield shocked the Bulgarian soldiers who were picking up the corpses. Without waiting for others to speak, these soldiers quickly ran to their positions. It can be seen from the running action that these people who dare to pick up the corpses are veterans, and each has a good skill. Aside from the soldiers, who were initially ambushed, few people were hit after the gunfire point. Seeing that he had nothing to gain, the Allied officer who led the sneak attack immediately took the soldiers and fled to his position. It was too dangerous outside the position. All life was more important. The soldiers who had just picked up the corpses and ran back from the Bulgarian position were gasping for breath and could not speak. The situation just now was too dangerous, and they were all trying to escape for their lives. But some people no longer need to calm down their emotions. Instead, he started chatting with his comrades in the position. It was too dangerous just now. A bullet hit my feet and almost killed me. A short thin soldier with a pointed mouth and monkey cheeks was holding a cloth bag and bragging about the dangerous moment just now. Just then a voice came. Doro, take everyone to have a rest. Maybe the enemy will come again at some point. The soldier called Doro immediately stopped talking to the others and replied immediately. Okay company commander, I'll take them down to rest in a while. After speaking, Doro handed the cloth bag in his hand to the company commander who appeared. That's what we got today. The company commander who appeared in front of Doro was obviously Second Lieutenant Bodnov, who had previously participated in the Balkan War and fought against the Romanian army with Captain Sakdorf. Lieutenant Bodnov, who had not seen him for a few years, still had the atmosphere of a military school, but now he has fully grown up. Wearing the rank of captain, he also leads a company himself. Facing the cloth bag handed over by Doro, Bodnov did not take it, but asked instead, anything good? In the face of his company commander's question, Doro's Ian Bayo took out a golden pocket watch and said, look at the company commander, this is a gold watch made in Switzerland. Look at its fineness. I dare say that the person who uses this watch must be a great noble. There is also a paragraph in it, dedicated to my beloved Marina. Doro opened the pocket watch cover and turned it over and handed it to Bodnov. Look at the company commander, the beauty inside must be the wife of the owner of this watch. Bodnov, who knew what Doro was thinking, glanced at it and said, I'll take this to the city, but don't get your hopes up about whether someone will redeem you. You've only been redeemed a few times in 3 months. Facing Doro, whose mind was seen through, he touched his head and said with a smile, company commander, this is at least an opportunity. Maybe it's something of a big noble. We even make a fortune. At least we can guarantee to let us have a big meal. Think about it, champagne, fine wine, grilled steak, honey bread, etc. These something to make everyone envy us. Doro's words made everyone present swallow their throats. They hadn't eaten these things for too long. Ha ha ha. Bodnov burst into laughter when he saw this, and the laughter interrupted everyone's memories. Then he tapped Dos on the shoulder and said, I hope your dream comes true. Even if no one redeems it, at least you can get some bread back. Everything that happened in front of Captain Bodnov was the norm of defending the Bulgarian army on the front line. The long-term shortage of supplies forced the soldiers to find their own way. Since more than a year ago, some smart and energetic businessmen have thought of turning the seized goods obtained by the soldiers into items they can use. Alcohol and food have become the first choice of these businessmen, which is also the reason why picking up corpses is the key to prevailing in the Bulgarian army. Such a move has developed from a private action at the beginning to a teamwork, and the distribution of the picked up property has also made a more scientific change. 1/3 goes to individuals, 1/3 goes to the officer class, and 1/3 goes to soldiers. This share ratio took care of everyone, and also allowed the cause to flourish, and even the families of the fallen officers paid a lot of money to redeem their relics. This industry has also changed the fate of some people, such as this soldier named Doro. From a soldier's point of view, Doro is unqualified. He lacks enough courage to face the enemy's attack. He is a thief who is proficient in rummaging for property and escape. This makes him a very qualified candidate to pick up corpses, and in fact he does a good job. In a career like this for nearly a year, he's always found the most valuable guy on the team, and he hasn't suffered a single injury. This made him prosperous in this deformed industry, and even Bodnov let Doro directly become the head of these people, and Doro even had his own experience in picking up corpses. According to the amount of property acquired, Doro divided it into several grades. Among them, the first class is the British and French local officers. They have a lot of property, and they are the only people who want to meet the chance of redemption. The second class is Indian officers. These officers with curry smell are also relatively rich, as long as they have some gold products on their bodies. This is hard currency. The third class is Australian and New Zealand officers, who generally have some watches or other items that can be sold for some money. In the end, there are other officers who are not lucky enough to get anything. The senior leaders of the Bulgarian military are very aware of the situation of picking up corpses on the front line. However, in order to alleviate the shortage of supplies and some other indescribable situations, the military turned a blind eye to this, and Admiral Zekov, who is the commander-in-chief of Bulgaria and also the commander of Thessaloniki, is also clear about this. It's just that he can't care about it now, because Lieutenant General Kudinchev's telegram is giving him a big headache. Damn it. Where do I go to find 100,000 troops to send to him and ask within 10 days in the city of Thessaloniki? Admiral Zekov, the commander, complained to his chief of staff. Seeing General Zekov expressing his anger, Lieutenant General Ivanov, who served as the commander of the First Army in the Balkan War and was in charge of capturing Edel, said instead, "I know Kudinchev, and he wouldn't have sent a telegram if he hadn't really been helpless." Facing the words of his chief of staff, Admiral Zekov answered directly, "I know what you're talking about." And he said that it can only block Toka. "We don't want to lose this war, so we can only help him." The chief of staff spoke directly. "We still have 2 divisions in the capital." Facing the words of the chief of staff, Zekov thought about it and said it. Only 27 of the 2 divisions in the capital can be used, so let's keep the 35. Don't go to the front to create chaos. Lieutenant General Ivanov, who understood Zekov's intentions, said with a wry smile, "In this case, after deducting the 27th division, it still needs 80,000 troops. It seems that it can only be transferred from here." Yes, I have carefully studied the battle report sent by Lieutenant General Kudinchev. Now they are more dangerous there, so they can't be overstated in the deployment of troops. Facing Zekov's explanation, Lieutenant General Ivanov asked worriedly, "The main force of Thessaloniki is drawn like this. Will it give us a chance to face the enemy?" Won't. Facing the chief of staff's concerns, Zekov gave his answer without hesitation, and he also gave his own basis. "According to my observation of the current war situation, the allied forces we are facing have lost their spirit. If Romania starts war in the morning for a month, I will be very worried. But now we have hit the enemy's Anzac army, the Serbs, and the others. What I'm thinking about is going back to my hometown. As for the Greeks, we have experienced their combat effectiveness in the Balkan War. There are too few British and French local troops, and it's not that you haven't seen colonial troops." According to Admiral Zekov, none of the allied forces in front of him could fight. So I can mobilize the 7th Division, 11th Division, 14th Division, 21st Division and 2nd Mountain Brigade to form reinforcement, and then merge with the 27th Division in the capital, which can meet Kudinchev's needs. After walking around for a while, Admiral Zekov still felt a little uneasy, and continued to talk. In addition, the 3rd Independent Artillery Regiment will be transferred as support. Lieutenant General Ivanov of the 3rd Independent Artillery Regiment certainly notes that this is a decent artillery unit that has participated in many battles, big and small. Among them, the regiment's 150 long-barreled cannon battalion, with a range of up to 12.5 kilometers, is one of the few ultra-long-range large-caliber artillery pieces in Bulgaria. This time, in order to deal with the Romanians, Admiral Zhekov made a lot of money. Lieutenant General Ivanov thought carefully about Admiral Zhekov's arrangement, and there was no other better way. Looks like that's all it takes. The transfer order in Zhekov's mouth happened to select Captain Bodnov's company, which made the soldiers very dissatisfied. Damn, why do you have to call us again, just after a bad battle, and yet to have a day off, and have to set off to fight the Romanians? Why not another division? I heard that there are many divisions selected this time. There are 7 divisions, 14 divisions, and 21 divisions. Can our 11 division escape? Damn it, these officers don't know what to think. They just run around, because they can fight. If they knew it earlier, it would be better to find a weaker unit, and stay there. The soldiers expressed their dissatisfaction with angry expressions on their faces. Alright. Seeing that everyone was talking more and more outrageous, Captain Bodnov quickly comforted his soldiers. I don't want to be recruited to fight, but this is a military order, and we must obey as soldiers. Let's all prepare. Under Bodnov's comfort, the soldiers were indignantly preparing for the march. As an officer who had fought against Romania, Bodnov knew that this reinforcement of Pleven made everyone very dissatisfied. The 2 years of endless fighting, and the lack of hope of victory has made everyone very frustrated. And the news of famine in many people's hometowns also made everyone uncomfortable. Many people have long held their dissatisfaction in their hearts. If it wasn't for the high prestige of Admiral Zhekov as the commander-in-chief, such dissatisfaction would have caused even greater commotion, and it would have been suppressed like this. But if this situation continues, there will be a day when the soldiers' emotions cannot be suppressed. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, chapter 340. Important chapter, you must read it. At this time, this single chapter is issued, mainly because Esteemed Bread has something to say to everyone. It's been a year since Mantou wrote the book, and it was tears when I said about the update, which hurt the hearts of many readers. Especially here, I need to apologize to Cheyenne Row, who has a love letter. He gave it to the leader when I put it on the shelf, but he ran away because of my update. Here I say sorry to all the readers who liked this book, because of the update problem. I'm sorry everyone, I was too self-willed before. Of course, I'm not just posting a single chapter to apologize for the update, but to negotiate the end of the book. Some readers and friends advised me before, this book is so bad, now that you should finish it. I know they are doing this for my own good, so it is not the way for the teacher to drag it. And because of the problem of procrastination, my book is probably on the editor's blacklist, so don't think about what to recommend. So I want to ask you all, should I finish the book after World War I, or continue to write about World War II? In fact, for the next description, Mantou still thinks that he can write a lot of things, intervening in the Hungarian Revolution, the Soviet-Polish War, and the Turkish Revolution. In addition, the competition with the Soviet Union about the Ukraine region is also a very important focus. As for the post-war, the occupation of the Ruhr area, the Great Depression, the beer can incident, the rise of the mustache, the Spanish Civil War, and other interwar events can be written. Regarding the intermittent situation of my recent updates, to be honest, it is mainly caused by subscriptions. Every time I look at the number of subscriptions, I have no motivation to code words well. After a careful decision, I will make a promise here. Next month, I will guarantee 2 updates a day, no more than 3 days of leave, and I will update it until the end of the month. To see the number of subscriptions, I will check the total number of subscriptions on the 1st. For statistics, as long as the average reading is higher than 500, I will continue to finish World War II. If it is lower than 500, I will start preparing for the end of World War I. The specific situation is like this. I feel a little sorry for the book friends who have been supporting me. I always feel like I plan to be a deserter. Here's a note on why Bulgaria was not annexed. For the current Romania, there is only one opportunity to annex Bulgaria, and that is the period when Germany and Austria merged to dismember the Czech Republic. It was impossible before this. As for why this has a lot to do with geopolitics, please listen to me, a half-hearted keyboard geo lover. Tell me slowly. First of all, this was absolutely impossible before the First World War, because the Balkans had 2 father figures, Austria-Hungary and Russia, that Romania could never mess with. Before World War I, the only thing that could bully and carve up territory in the Balkans was the Ottoman Empire, but unfortunately Romania did not border. As for Istanbul, this is the heart of Russia. Whoever moves it will stab whoever it is. After the end of World War I, Austria-Hungary disintegrated and Russia changed its color. So is there a chance? Yes, but the opportunity is not worth it. Because Ukraine is much stronger than Bulgaria in any way, and it is much easier for Ukrainians to integrate ethnicity. Therefore, the key point for Romania to become stronger after World War I was in Ukraine. And digesting these areas requires time, and 3 important things about time. This time is measured in 10 years. Actually, it is best to use 20 years as a unit. You can see it by looking at the curve now. When the digestion is almost over, Germany's rearmament starts again. At this time, it is completely possible to use the opportunity of the German-Austrian merger to pursue Romania's annexation of Bulgaria. At this time, whether it is population or economic factors, this kind of resistance can be minimized. After the merger after World War I, the Bulgarian resistance rate was too high, and it might become a dragging burden. Then there is the problem of the inconvenience of Romania entering and leaving the Mediterranean Sea. This is very simple. Even if you enter the Mediterranean Sea, you can only make soy sauce, or you need World War II to break the situation. There are 2 key points here, the Suez Canal and Istanbul. Among them, Istanbul must win the main and sign a warship navigation agreement with the Turkey, using the favorable factors before the Polish campaign of World War II, forcing the Turkey to travel freely through the warship. It is also possible not to pass, taken in one fell swoop after the annexation of Bulgaria. As for the Suez Canal, it must be at war with the United Kingdom, so this is also an important moment for Romania to lay out the Arab world. After the First World War, this was the sphere of influence of Britain and France. Romania did not have much energy to take care of it here, and it was too busy with too many things in the country. The fastest update, no pop-up window to read, please bookmark. Chapter 341 Turbulent Bulgaria. 1. On the streets of Sofia in winter, a large group of soldiers are carrying their bags and there are many people on both sides of the road. It can be seen by sending other people's faces with sadness that they are sending their relatives to the battlefield. According to official Bulgarian statistics, Sofia, which had a population of 470,000 before the war, now counts only 310,000. Most of the population gap of 160,000 was recruited into the army, and the 27th Division was formed in this way. As a division formed by Bulgaria's third wave in 16 years, it can only be said that the 27th Division was formed very late, mainly due to the lack of equipment and training. As the 27th Division formed by the soldiers who have been selected and left, his training cycle is generally longer than others. And according to the words of its division commander, the main responsibility of these troops, consisting of soldiers aged around 40 and 16 or 17, should be to defend second-tier cities. But now facing the situation of both sides attacked by Romania and the Entente, the 27th Division can only rush the ducks to the shelves. The farewell scene now shows the 27th Division. As the order issued by Admiral Zekub has already arrived in the capital Sofia, the 27th Division that received the order is ready to pack, and they will go to the battlefield. So it is right for the relatives of the soldiers to be sad. Moreover, the reinforcement composed of troops drawn from Thessaloniki have arrived outside the city, and they are now rushing to join him and go to Pravin to reinforce Lieutenant General Kudinchev, who is struggling there. However, waiting for their reinforcement outside the city has some troubles of its own. In the temporary headquarters of the reinforcement outside the city, Lieutenant General Triev, who was in charge of leading the team, asked the communication staff with some dissatisfaction. Is Sofia still refusing to give me the supplies I need? The little staff officer who was questioned did not dare to give an answer. Sofia's military supplies warehouse has sent information. They have ammunition and military supplies, but the wine and other living materials we need are not stored in their warehouse. The communication staff took a look at Lieutenant General Triev and continued. Then I asked the city government to coordinate according to your instructions, but they refused, saying that they didn't have much supplies, and our request was too large to meet. Hearing what the communication staff said, Lieutenant General Triev was very dissatisfied with the city government's answer, because he knew that Sofia, who lived in the capital with many powerful people, could not have the materials he said. Obviously, the city government was perfunctory to him. Triev felt a little dissatisfied, so he picked up the phone and spoke to the operator. Mir Vasily, who picked me up from the city government, told me that Triev was looking for him. After waiting for a few minutes, Lieutenant General Triev finally got through to the mayor's phone. Hey, is it Mir Vasily? I'm Triev. I remember the last time we met was at the King's banquet. This time, the soldiers were complaining because they were in a hurry. I'm going to give them some alcohol and food to ease the mood. No, we have the order of the Commander-in-Chief, Admiral Zekov, and we can collect necessary living materials. I just said that Sofia is the capital, so I can do this. It is not because are you in a hurry to say the wrong thing or nothing. Mir Vasily, hello. Hello. Lieutenant General Triev, who put down the phone, looked a little gloomy. This Mir Vasily had no choice but to take him. Triev felt a little aggrieved because Mir Vasily regarded himself as a person who used power for personal gain. The conscience of heaven and earth, I have no such idea at all, and everything I do is for the country. As a general who has led soldiers for many years, he knows the situation of soldiers too well. The long-term shortage of living materials and the confrontation and battle with the allies in Thessaloniki have already made the soldiers somewhat dissatisfied. This time, the emergency deployment of frontline troops to reinforce Pravin has already shaken the soldiers' morale. During the 4-day march from Thessaloniki to Sofia, hundreds of soldiers were left behind. Triev, the commander, immediately saw the difference. Too many people were left behind, and it was getting more and more festering every day. So, when he walked to Sofia, Lieutenant General Triev immediately contacted Admiral Zekov to express his concerns, and asked to stop here for a day, to restore the soldiers' low morale. As a means of restoring morale, tobacco, alcohol, bacon and other daily necessities have become the materials he needs, but at present, the government has no idea of meeting his requirements. Just when Lieutenant General Triev was a little undecided, the Chief of Staff, who went to the bottom to make a lap, walked into the temporary command headquarters with a cold wind. Triev asked immediately, after seeing his old partner enter the door, what was the result of the inspection. The Chief of Staff spoke to him with a worried face. The situation of the troops is a little bit bad, and the soldiers are very resentful about taking them out of the battlefield to reinforce Pravin. I have visited many companies and officers have complained to me that the soldiers are emotionally unstable and that they are not responding to their orders. There is also a taste of yang and yin. Hearing what the Chief of Staff said, Triev knew that this was the soldier's vent for his emotions, that he had been unable to rest because of the nervousness of the battlefield. He also understands these soldiers very well, but the current situation makes it impossible for Bulgaria to put these elite soldiers to rest. That's why he planned to use tobacco and alcohol to anesthetize the soldiers, to release part of their emotions, but it seems that his plan is going to fail. The Chief of Staff looked at Lieutenant General Triev with an ugly face and said tentatively, "Didn't get the extra supplies we needed." Facing the Chief of Staff's question, Triev nodded heavily and said, "I just got on the phone with the mayor of Sofia and he declined my request." Hearing his partner's words, the Chief of Staff said with some sting, "What are these government officials thinking? Aren't they afraid of unrest from the discontent of the soldiers?" Facing the words of the Chief of Staff, Triev said with a wry smile, "He thought what I said was a threat to him." Triev spread his hands and continued to speak helplessly. "So, it is impossible for us to get these supplies from the Sofia government." In the face of Triev's words, the Chief of Staff said, after thinking for a while, "Why don't we ask His Excellency the Prime Minister again?" Facing the words of the Chief of Staff, Triev hesitated. The reason is very simple. If all such things go to the Prime Minister, it fully shows that his personal ability is limited. So Triev said hesitantly, "It's up to the Prime Minister to handle this kind of thing. I'm afraid neither of us will have a good time." The Prime Minister has a lot of things every day, and it is impossible to arrange it directly for such a thing. Moreover, they are military generals, so it is not appropriate to go to the Prime Minister directly. The Chief of Staff said. Prime Minister Radoslav should not reject us to this. Triev answered somewhat uncertainly. It's hard to say, you know the style of our Prime Minister. Prime Minister Radoslav was born in Norwich, and was a lawyer, and had the experience of studying in Germany and Austria-Hungary. Before that, he served as the youngest Prime Minister of Bulgaria, July to September 1886. After the resignation of Prime Minister Zheshov after the Balkan Wars, Radoslav's Liberal Party formed a cabinet, and he was instrumental in promoting Bulgaria's accession to the Allies. His famous quote is, "If you love your country, then you should sacrifice everything for it." So in the face of a prime minister with fanatical patriotism, both of them are a little uncertain. Why don't you call and ask? Facing Triev's question, the Chief of Staff, who had been impulsive before, calmed down a bit. He also said hesitantly, "I think it's better to think about this in the long run, otherwise we'll get these supplements in the next city as well." Alright. After Triev replied casually, he glanced at the map. Marked the next city on the march. Ferisa, which is separated from Sofia by a central Bulgarian mountain range, will be their next stop, and then they will arrive at Pleven. Chapter 342, Turbulent Bulgaria, 2. The decision of the two reinforcement commanders did not make them much appreciated by the soldiers, because a day's rest is only enough for the soldiers to relieve their physical fatigue, and there is absolutely no way to deal with their inner dissatisfaction. We are either working hard on this battlefield, or being transferred to that battlefield to rescue. I've had enough of this damn day. It's the same with me. Too many lives have been won in this bad battle. We've already changed a lot of people in our class. Miller, Yale, Carl, Love, etc. Remember that Suman? Of course I remember. Isn't that the old guy who is older than the squad leader's military age, and who knows every day that we cherish our lives and nagging? Didn't this guy die half a year ago? Yes, this nagging old guy died before. He once said to me in a small talk that before we came, he saw no less than 10 comrades killed, some of whom couldn't even find their bodies arrive. It's okay to work hard on the front line. Why have many people died of starvation in their hometown after years of insufficiency? But those powerful nobles don't have to worry about this at all. In the camp, the two soldiers gradually changed from complaining about the cruelty of the battlefield to talking about social injustice. What's more worrying is that the two soldiers were unscrupulous to vent their dissatisfaction, and no one came to stop them. This shows that this kind of dissatisfaction has become a common phenomenon in the military camp. It is like a dynamite keg placed under high temperature. As long as there is a little accident, it is likely to explode with its due power. Just then another soldier came over. The news that Lionley has only come down. Let us fix the day here. The two soldiers who were chatting immediately stopped talking, and one of them asked immediately, "Did you say, let's go out and relax?" The soldier being questioned seemed to be very skilled at being asked this question, but he shook his head and said, "I know what you think, but unfortunately it can only be in the military camp. It's impossible for you to see Sofia's romance." Facing the words of his comrades, the soldiers felt a little depressed when asked. After experiencing the emotionally tense battles on the battlefield, the necessary venting is also a part of the soldier's stress relief. Tobacco, alcohol, sex, and killing are the best solutions. However, considering the current civilized society, killing on behalf of ignorance is not suitable for this era. So tobacco, alcohol and sex have become the best choices now. The officers don't let them go out to relax, which makes the soldiers who are full of anticipation feel a little strange. However, this cannot be blamed on the decision of the officers. They know too much about the virtues of their soldiers, and every time they relax, they will cause a lot of trouble such as fights and theft. And they are currently in the capital Sofia. Too many powerful people here will cause big trouble if they are not good. So for the sake of safety, they can only be confined to the military camp. Unfortunately, there are no tobacco and alcohol items for them to relax. The soldier who informed the two of them saw their depressed mood and whispered another situation. If you are bored, someone in Sanlian is organizing a speech. If you are interested, you can take a look. The words of their comrades in arms made the two of them interested, and it was boring to stay in the barracks anyway, so they asked casually, What did the speech say? I don't know this. I also heard from others the soldier who reported the letter did not answer the question of the two, but left after saying a word. Looking at the departing comrades. One of them asked, "Are you going to take a look?" "Why not? You can't get out of the barracks anyway, and you'll be idle." "If you're idle." The two who had nothing to do in the military camp decided to go to Sanlian to see the excitement. They did what they said, and it didn't take long for them to come to the 3rd Company camp not far from them. As soon as the two entered the room of the 3rd Company, they found that there were not many people in it at all. Many soldiers surrounded a soldier with glasses and were listening to his speech. When the two saw this situation, they approached curiously and wanted to hear what was being said here. After the two approached, they heard the soldier who was speaking using his affectionate language said out loud, "Soldiers, it has been a long time since our motherland joined this war, and we have been fighting the enemy for nearly 3 years on the battlefield. For this reason, 3 years is enough for a newborn baby to learn to call his father and mother, but now the victory of the war is getting further and further away from us. Whenever we think of the sacrificed comrades and relatives, we should ask in our hearts whether it is worth it." The words of the soldiers who were speaking resonated with everyone, but some soldiers still expressed different opinions. "But it's about taking back our own territory and our fellow citizens that were occupied by our neighbors." The dissent didn't make the speaking soldier feel that the question was too difficult to answer, but he opened his mouth to answer. "Yes, that's all the government wants us to know. If it's really just to get what belongs to us, then we should negotiate with our neighbors and let the people in those areas decide instead of joining the damn game. Let's shed our blood for it." Having said this, the soldier who gave the speech said emotionally, "Comrades in arms, this war has cost us too much. You all know the shortage of domestic supplies, but do you know the extent of the shortage of supplies? How do ordinary soldiers know about this issue? The government is most aware of these situations, but it is impossible for the government to inform them when the situation is stable." Seeing that no one could answer, the soldier speaking directly said, "A lot of people in China have starved to death because of food shortages. It's unlikely." Is this an exaggeration? The speaker's words made the surrounding soldiers a little unbelievable, and they started talking. Seeing that the soldiers were a little unconvinced, the soldiers who gave the speech directly said more exciting local news. "My uncle works in the government statistics department. According to the information he learned, in the first half of this year, 57,000 people died of starvation in our country due to famine, most of whom were the elderly and children. The number of people who died of starvation in the second half of this year more to 92,700 people died from various diseases caused by starvation." Soldiers were taken aback by the reported death toll. "In the past, when I communicated with my family, the most I learned was that there was not enough food to eat, and that 1 or 2 people in the surrounding neighbors died because of this. Neither of them had an intuitive understanding of the numbers. Now this question is directly and nakedly exposed in front of them, but it makes them not know how to answer." Seeing the shocked soldiers around, the speaker continued to agitate. "You know the truth now. These are figures that the government dare not disclose. Because while they encourage us to go to the battlefield, they let our families suffer from starvation or even death. And those nobles and powerful people don't have this kind of thing at all. Worry, they have the money to buy all kinds of living materials, even wine from France, tobacco and tea from England. It's not fair that they have no such danger at all. When we and our families are fighting for this country phenomenon, we must fight against this fate." Among the soldiers who were excited by the content and atmosphere of the speech, someone responded loudly to his words. "We have to fight this fate." The soldiers who were driven also shouted, "Fight, fight. We don't want to fight anymore. We want peace and bread." Peace and bread. The soldiers who gave the speech were very excited when they saw this situation. He finally let the soldiers vent their dissatisfaction with the government, and things would be easier to do next. There are more than one such speeches in the military camp. In fact, there are many such people who have sneaked in throughout the military camp. They use various methods to make the soldiers burst out with dissatisfaction with the government. And these people are actually Bulgarian political forces, but they just hold different opinions. Now that the country is facing a critical moment, of course, they want to jump off the broken ship of Austria, and now is also a very suitable time. So in the early hours of January 12th, 1918, soldiers in the barracks rioted, and they demanded that the government withdraw from the war. This made the Bulgarian government teeter on the back burner. Chapter 343, Turbulent Bulgaria, Part 2. In the early morning in the city of Sofia, news of an army insurrection was alarming. Many people are worried about the army's refusal to obey the government's order to speak its own voice, but some people are delighted. However, no matter what the attitude of these people is, for the current Bulgarian government, quelling the incident has become a top priority point as the Prime Minister of the government, Radoslav, bears the brunt of the need for a solution to this matter in the Prime Minister's office. Radoslav watched Mayor Vasily, who had more than enough success in his office. The mayor, who was a little fat, kept wiping the hot sweat from his forehead in front of the Prime Minister. In the early morning of winter, without strenuous exercise, my head was sweating, and it was no wonder. The Mayor Vasily, you really broke the heart of the king and me. Sitting behind the desk, the tall and thin Prime Minister Radoslav said coldly about the mayor of Sofia in front of him. Radoslav's words made Mayor Vasily wipe his sweat more frequently. Looking at this greedy and stupid pig in front of him, Radoslav wondered how he had chosen him to be the mayor of the capital. I don't know Mayor Vasily, who has been criticized, but now he ignores the Prime Minister's ugly face and bites the bullet. I didn't expect this to happen either. I thought General Triev needed it himself. So I should comfort you. Hearing the Prime Minister's voice soaring from low to high, Vasily didn't know that this was a precursor to the Prime Minister's impending anger, and he quickly changed the subject. My lord, I think the soldiers need to be appeased first. I just ask people to send meat, tobacco and alcohol to the barracks to appease them. No thanks. Looking at Vasily, who was somewhat unclear, Prime Minister Radoslav's eyes flashed with disgust, and he said it directly. I have arranged for someone to deliver the things to the military camp to General Triev, and now the troubled soldiers have been temporarily appeased in the military camp. Hearing the Prime Minister's words, Mayor Vasily asked with some joy. Very good, these soldiers will stop making trouble. What are you thinking? Facing the optimistic mood of Mayor Vasily, Prime Minister Radoslav continued to speak after scolding. It's only temporarily stabilizing these troublesome soldiers, but we can't agree to their demands. Now we need to let Admiral Zekov rush back to Sofia. Only he can appease the emotions of the soldiers. After Prime Minister Radoslav finished speaking, he continued to explain the matter to Mayor Vasily. In addition, you immediately prepare another batch of supplies, give them to General Triev, and tell him that I can openly supply him with food, tobacco and alcohol, but must not let the soldiers go out of the barracks to Sofia to make trouble. Mayor Vasily knew that this was his last chance to save himself, and he said it immediately. Prime Minister, please rest assured that I will give General Triev sufficient supplies and will not make it difficult for him. Prime Minister Radoslav waved his hand after listening to his words. Go do it. After Mayor Vasily withdrew from office, Prime Minister Radoslav recruited a secretary. Arrange a car immediately. I need to go to the palace to meet the king. The secretary who received the order replied immediately. I'll arrange the car right now. After he was left alone in the office, Prime Minister Radoslav's expression immediately became very ugly. Years of political experience have taught him that everything he has done so far can only be regarded as a remedy, and even if it is successful, it is just to make himself decent when he steps down. But as a qualified politician, Radoslav knew that a remedy was the best way for Bulgaria to exit the war with dignity. If news of the soldiers' insurrection had made it known to the Entente, the price for Bulgaria would have been too great. And he also knew that the soldiers' riot this time was too strange. According to his investigation, there were many shadows of political forces, but now he was powerless to do anything about it. Now he can only stabilize the situation first. However, Prime Minister Radoslav wanted to temporarily hide the efforts of the Allies, but it was a waste of effort. Even the people of Sofia knew about it, so of course the spy hidden in it would send this important news back to the country. So the news leaked out that morning, and the first one to know was Romania, which was at war with Bulgaria. Your Majesty, the latest news is that Bulgarian soldiers riot in Sofia. In the royal palace of Bucharest, Edel, who was accompanying his wife Sophie Mary, heard the chief guard Karist carrying a telegram and loudly announcing the good news. What? The words of the captain of the guard made Edel immediately anxious. Bulgarian soldiers riot. Show me point. After taking over the telegram from the captain of the guard, Edel immediately checked it, leaving the captain alone to endure the resentment of Queen Mary for being disturbed. Point. The telegram was simple, just what the captain of the guard had said, but it still excited Edel. Point. Great, even God is helping Romania. Point. Seeing that Edel was happy because of the telegram, Queen Mary was a little curious, because she had never seen her husband so excited about the army's capture of Transylvania before, so she asked, a little puzzled, "My dear, why does this news make you so happy?" Point. Facing Queen Mary's inquiry, the excited Edel was of course willing to share the joy in his heart with his wife. "This news is too important. Bulgaria has triggered an army riot, which can be said that they are only one step away from defeat and surrender. As long as Bulgaria is captured, the passage between us and the allied countries will be opened, and the steady stream of reinforcement and military supplies will be enough. We face the attack of Dia calmly. Even if we say some arrogant words, we are already invincible." Point. Listening to Edel's explanation, Queen Mary, who did not understand the military, also understood that this was a major event that changed the environment of the Romanian war. "Then this way, our army will feel much better at the front." Point. Yes, dear, you are right. So this news needs to be known to Lieutenant General Ploiesti. Point. When Edel said this, he immediately asked Karist, "Has this news been communicated to the Chief of General Staff?" Facing the king's question, Karist immediately answered, "Your Majesty, we have already sent it to the Chief of Staff as soon as possible." Point. Very good. Well done. Point. Lieutenant General Farit, outside the city of Pleven, also received a telegram from the Chief of the General Staff. The news on the telegram made him very excited, and he immediately called the staff to give orders. "Now I order that the onslaught on Pleven should not stop. Tell the officers that the Bulgarian soldiers in Sofia have refused to continue fighting, and we must let the enemy know this news and break the opponent's will." Point. So under the order of Ferit, a new offensive of the Romanian army was launched again, but unlike the past, the Bulgarian soldiers defending this time also heard the surprising news that their reinforcement had refused to continue fighting in Sofia. Point. It's all fake. It's a Romanian conspiracy. Point. Faced with this situation, the Bulgarian officers who led the team tried their best to explain, but it also made them look a little hysterical. And the news about the reinforcement was mentioned less above, which made the soldiers a little confused. Could it be true that what the Romanians said? Faced with this situation, the morale of the Bulgarian army dropped a lot, which really left the commander, Lieutenant General Kudinchev, helpless. "Now that the reinforcement are indeed gone, I can't let the soldiers know, otherwise a big defeat is in sight." Point. He felt the same way about Admiral Zekov in Thessaloniki. Just that afternoon, the allied *** team located outside Thessaloniki launched a tidal wave of ferocious offensive against them, as if they had taken the wrong medicine. And, like the Romanian army, it was propaganda that the troops that had arrived in Sofia to reinforce Pleven had rioted and refused to continue to obey the government's orders. The sudden attack and this astonishing news caught the troops defending the front line by surprise, and fierce hand-to-hand battles took place in many areas. Thanks to Admiral Zekov's steadfastness, he immediately arranged for reinforcement to stand up against the enemy's artillery fire, and he flatly denied that it was the enemy's rumor, so the enemy's attack was called back. Point. However, the allies were not discouraged and continued to storm the Bulgarian positions, which made the Thessaloniki defense line, which had been dispatched with nearly 100,000 allied troops, some signs of crumbling. This time, Admiral Zekov dared not leave, and could only stay here to maintain the stability of the front. Point. This made Prime Minister Radoslav's response immediately ineffective, and now Bulgarian politicians know that this is the moment when a decision must be made. Point. P.S. Today, I talked to the editor about a new idea of mine, and I plan to write a novel about traveling through Japan with a different World War II theme. I plan to cross after the Tokyo earthquake, and then rely on the Chiba and naval forces to climb to the top of Japan, gradually become the spokesperson of the Navy in the 226 incident, and then try my best to prevent the 77 incident from happening. Open Pearl Harbor in advance and take Hawaii, seize Panama Canal. At the same time, start the Nanyang raiders and win the British, French and Dutch colonies. At the same time, use this record to seize the power of the Prime Minister and lead the Japanese people to fight. Then log into India and sweat the British forces as a war sustenance. And use this time to log in California or Mexico, and then use the Rocky Mountains and deserts to stop the US Army and finally take Japan to destruction. It's a pity that this brainhole theme was suppressed by the editor Maya. She only said one sentence, don't drag her to death. So I will tell you this brainhole. I hope some warriors can write it out. Baidu search chapter 344 Bulgarian defeat, part 1. In the face of the allied countries and Romania taking advantage of your illness to kill you, the Bulgarian government has no good solution at present. They can only ask their allies for help. Point in Berlin, German executives gathered to discuss Bulgaria's request for help. As the newly appointed Chancellor, Count George Eglin is presenting his views to the Kaiser and colleagues present. We must respond to Bulgaria's request for help, and according to our intelligence in Sofia, Bulgaria is currently planning to withdraw from the war. This is a disastrous result for us. I believe the military does not want to see this happen. Prime Minister Eglin said that at the end. He also pointed to Hindenburg and Ludendorff, who had come back from the front to attend the meeting. The two people who participated in this meeting on behalf of the military, of course, knew how harmful this situation was to the Allies, and if Bulgaria is withdrawn from the war at this time, it will give the British and French troops who are currently struggling to resist the German offensive planned by Ludendorff on the front line. What a great encouragement. And it will have a greater impact on the attacking German army, which is unacceptable to the military. For this reason, as the current first person in the military, Hindenburg spoke unpleasantly. As chief of the general staff, of course I know the consequences of the Allies' withdrawal from the war, and we will never ignore it. I have discussed this with First Quartermaster General Ludendorff. When Hindenburg said this, he signaled to Ludendorff, and the first quartermaster as his partner immediately took Hindenburg's words and continued to speak. On the way, I and Your Excellency the Chief of the General Staff have already made a military plan. The troops we can immediately deploy are the 48th and 94th Divisions in Munich, and the 89th and 153rd Divisions in Nuremberg, as well as the 72nd and 286th Divisions refurbished at Stuttgart. Then add the 42nd, 62nd, and 87th Divisions that have been transported to Frankfurt to form a temporary new army, responsible for military reinforcement. In addition to this, we have also asked the Allies to send troops to reinforce Bulgaria, but we have not yet received a response from Vienna and Istanbul. After Ludendorff finished speaking, his heart was bleeding. Not to mention the currently refurbished troops, the 3 divisions that have been transported to Frankfurt, but the troops that were just drawn from the Eastern Front. He also intends to use it as the second echelon of his offensive reinforcement, but for now it can only be used first in the newly formed Bulgarian direction. In fact, he didn't say a word, that is, if the reinforcement rush passed, in case Bulgaria has withdrawn from the war. Then these troops will be joined with the Austro-Hungarian army as a defense against the release of the Allies from Bulgaria. Of course, in addition to this, Marshal Mackensen, who is currently entangled with the Romanians in Bacău, will also receive a telegram from the General Staff. Ludendorff intends to question the outstanding master of mobile warfare, why he has been entangled with the Romanians for so long. After Ludendorff had spoken about the military plan, Eglin, the Prime Minister, knew it was time for him to speak out about the government's plan. I saw him walking in front of the crowd and speaking. Our government has also discussed the assistance to Bulgaria and plans to allocate some of the materials obtained from the Bolsheviks to aid Bulgaria. Among them, the most critical point is food and other living items. We can only allocate 40,000 tons of wheat, and 1,000 tons of meat, and 100 tons of sugar as aid. In addition, our negotiations with Austria-Hungary and Turkey were not smooth, and Vienna was only willing to give 5,000 tons of food as aid. Istanbul is willing to give 10,000 tons of grain and 800 tons of cotton as aid. According to the negotiation process, we believe that this is also the biggest concession that the two countries can make. After listening to the Prime Minister and the military have already negotiated, William II, who has been overridden, can only answer. Then let's follow this plan point as the German plan was ready to be implemented. Military aid programs from Austria-Hungary and Turkey were also introduced. Austria-Hungary prepared to cooperate with Germany's military operations and formed a last batch of troops from the Eastern Front to form the 15th Army, and together with Germany's newly formed 16th Army to reinforce Bulgaria. Reinforced Sofia Point on the Turkish side. General Otto Zunders, the German commander who won the Battle of Dardanelles, led the Turkish Third Army to immediately reinforce the Salonika front line so that the Bulgarians could withdraw enough troops to deal with the Romanians' attack. The reason why Turkey and Bulgaria are so troublesome is that the relationship between the two countries has always been relatively tense. In addition, as the German side mediating it also made a lot of efforts in order to get Turkey to agree to send troops. It also gave a lot of promises, including various weapons and ammunition. The Turkish side also knows the importance and attaches great importance to Bulgaria, the only ally that can be connected by land, and immediately dispatched the Third Army to defend Istanbul as a reinforcement point. The reinforcement plans of the Allies could not escape the eyes of the Allies. After learning of the plans of the Allies, Britain and France were also preparing to dispatch troops to defeat the Bulgarian defenders in Thessaloniki in one fell swoop. Among them, the British side will directly turn the bow of the newly formed Australian and New Zealand troops preparing to reinforce the French front to reinforce the Greek side. The French side, which suffered a lot of casualties, also gritted its teeth to pick and choose from the colonial troops drawn from North Africa and took out 3 divisions as reinforcement to reinforce Greece. As for Lieutenant General Farid, who was already at war with the Bulgarian army in Pleven, he also received telegrams from home. The 2 newly formed mobilization divisions are ready to assemble to Varna, which can replace the 39th Division formed by the militia defending here, so that it can reinforce Lieutenant General Friet. His Excellency Lieutenant General, who received the telegram, was attracted by Previn, who was about to turn into ruins. The Bulgarian army, which had been resisting its own footsteps for a long time, was about to collapse. In fact, the Bulgarian soldiers were indeed on the verge of collapse after suffering tragic casualties and the failure of reinforcement to arrive. But Lieutenant General Kudinchev, as its commander, has some skills. He had it loudly preached among the soldiers that resisting the Romanian army was not for others, but to protect one's family from the invaders. Of course, this can only slightly improve the morale of the army. In addition, he also rewarded the soldiers with all the meat, tobacco and alcohol that he had stored in Pleven, and also rewarded those brave soldiers with many treasures. After both spiritual and material rewards, Bulgarian soldiers were able to continue to fight against Romanian soldiers who possessed superior firepower. However, these measures could only delay the decrease in the morale of the Bulgarian army, but could not completely resist the gap in firepower and troop capability. Bulgarian soldiers were gradually driven out of their positions in the continuous fierce attacks. And now Ferit is waiting for the only one. The soldiers drove the defenders out of the last position in the city, located in a block called Varian in the west of the city. This is the last way to protect the defenders in the city, so it is also the most solid point. Now the Romanian army, intending to get the Bulgarian soldiers out of the city, has launched the most violent offensive against it. The Romanians who attacked for this purpose used 3 210 heavy artillery direct fire. I believe this will make the defenders feel desperate. The process does not need to be described. At 4:15 in the afternoon, a report on the capture of Varian was placed in front of Lieutenant General Friet. Seeing that some of the staff members in front of him were blushing because of the news of the victory, Lieutenant General Friet spoke up. Send a telegram to the country and tell them the good news. In addition, let the 2nd Imperial Guard Division, the 3rd Division and the 6th Division form the leading force immediately, and immediately follow the retreating enemy to launch a harassing offensive. I don't want to fight this kind of offensive and defensive again. Battle point. The voice of Lieutenant General Fried fell, and the staff immediately replied, yes, as ordered. I'll give the order right away. As the order was issued, the 3 divisions that had just captured Pleven and had no time to rest immediately launched a pursuit. And at home, the news of Provin's victory has everyone cheering, especially at this critical juncture. Point B, do search. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 345, Bulgaria, 039, S defeat, Part 2. The news that Pleven had been captured by the Romanian army brought Sofia into chaos. Prime Minister Radoslav, as the head of the government, immediately convened a meeting of high-level officials to discuss the response. Chief of Staff, haven't the soldiers outside the city changed their minds? At the beginning of the meeting, Prime Minister Radoslav immediately asked Lieutenant General Livanov, who was the chief of the general staff. As Lieutenant General Livanov, who drove back to Sofia from Thessaloniki overnight, he shook his head and said, I have only been to the military camp outside the city, and the situation is not optimistic. The soldiers are more emotional, and the words of cessation of the war are preached everywhere in the military camp. Even if these soldiers are reorganized, it is difficult to continue fighting, and it will take a long time. Just fix it. The words of Lieutenant General Ivanov made Prime Minister Radoslav very unwilling, and he asked without giving up, can Lieutenant General Kudinchev reorganize the army and fight again? Prime Minister Radoslav was afraid that Lieutenant General Ivanov would not understand, and quickly gave the reasons for doing so. As long as we can stop the Romanians for 5 days, we can get reinforcement. The reinforcement from Turkey can take over the army in Thessaloniki, and General Zekov will be able to bring the army back to Sofia. We have the strength to fight the Romanians. In addition, according to the news sent back from Germany, the German-Austrian coalition can also arrive within 10 days, so we still have a chance. In the face of Prime Minister Radoslav's words of encouragement, Lieutenant General Livanov, as the chief of staff, could not bear to attack him. But he has to make it clear to government officials, even though the result may not be what they expected. Prime Minister, Lieutenant General Kudinchev's 6th Army currently has less than half of its staff, and is seriously lacking in machine guns, artillery and other weapons and equipment. More importantly, the Romanian army has been sending elite troops to keep attacking, allowing him there was no time to reorganize the troops. Now that the 6th Army was on the verge of collapse, it really had no ability to stop the Romanians. Ivanov's words made Prime Minister Radoslav feel a little depressed, and he muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, how so? Then he asked, Chief of Staff, is there no other way to stop the enemy's footsteps? In the face of the Prime Minister's inquiry, Lieutenant General Ivanov shook his head and said, there is no other way at the moment. The only possibility now is to allow reinforcement from neighboring countries to quickly arrive in Thessaloniki so that the troops can be dispatched to return to Sofia. But in this case, it is necessary to arrange troops in Sofia to stand guard. Ivanov's words immediately aroused huge repercussions. That won't work. It's not a good idea to stay in Sofia. Can't we change the place? Listening to the voices of disapproval, even Ivanov, who proposed the idea, knew how bad the decision was. These people are not opposed to the destruction of the capital in the defense of Sofia, but that there is currently no hope of victory. Although Germany and Austria had already defeated Russia on the most important Western front, the German army did not play a big role in the offensive of the British and French troops on the Western front. At present, it has only reached the front of the Marne River. However, compared to the last time when faced with a panic attack by the German army, this time the French government directly announced that, even if the German army captured Paris, the French people would never yield. This not only made Hindenburg and Ludendorff, who commanded the operation, feel a little bad, but also disappointed the Bulgarians who had hoped for this, and their desire to withdraw from the war had been dashed. In fact, before Romania declared war, a consensus was reached in Bulgaria. That is, this war has done too much harm to Bulgaria, so Bulgaria has always hoped to withdraw from the war peacefully. However, it is a pity that neither Dia, who pulled it into the camp, nor the opposing Britain and France are willing to let Bulgaria become their wish. Not to mention Serbia and Greece, which have territorial disputes with him. But now faced with both sides attacked by Romania and the Entente, Bulgaria is divided. Among them, the people headed by Prime Minister Radoslav planned to stand up to the attack from both sides and asked the allies to help themselves. They pinned their hopes on the Entente and could not afford to consume casualties, and Germany and Austria point the other group is dominated by opposition parties. They propose that Bulgaria can no longer fight and they can take the lead in signing a treaty with the Entente to withdraw from the war. Because Bulgaria was the first country to withdraw from the war, in order to leave room for negotiation between Germany and Austria, Britain and France would definitely not make Bulgaria lose too much point. The two groups of people have their own opinions and neither can convince the other, so their approach is also different in the face of this crisis. In the barracks outside the city, the soldiers who refused to fight were sitting together, and a middle-aged man dressed in plain and neat clothes was giving a speech to the soldiers on the platform. Soldiers, your desire to get out of the war is not overdone at all, and the government should not ignore your desires. Here we need to let them know that the demands of the people must be met and this war should not happen. Now must be let the government has made a decision. We cannot continue to sit here and wait. And now for the government to know our call. They must answer. The atmosphere at the scene caused some of the soldiers to shout loudly. The government has to answer. We are out of the war. Seeing that the atmosphere was warm, the middle-aged people who gave the speech also took the lead in shouting, "Peace not war." This sentence immediately detonated the scene, and everyone was shouting, "Peace not war." What if the government doesn't promise us change? The government point slowly. The soldiers' emotions were guided by the speaker, and the person who was watching was very satisfied and said to the person next to him, "Now that the soldiers are in a good mood, they will turn to dissatisfaction with the government and the Prime Minister. You need to cooperate more with the people. Let them have sympathy for the soldiers so that the German puppet can be removed." Bulgaria. It is no longer possible to stay on the broken ship of the barrel allies. The speaker seemed very dissatisfied with Prime Minister Radoslav and even used a puppet. However, the people around him agreed with his words very much, and only the person next to him nodded and replied, "Point rest assured, no one wants that person to remain Prime Minister." It seems that there are still many people who are dissatisfied with Prime Minister Radoslav. They can't suppress their inner thoughts and are eager to let the Prime Minister step down. Point the current situation makes them think that it is not difficult to pull the Prime Minister out of office. What needs to be considered is how to stop the war with the Allies. This requires them to exert their talents to help their motherland avoid the liquidation from Britain and France. Point B. Do search chapter 346 Bulgaria 039 S defeat below. Soldiers outside the city rioted, and they demanded the resignation of the Prime Minister and the cabinet within 2 days. This surprising news was quickly delivered in Sofia city, causing anxiety among the residents of the city. In other directions that did not face the barracks, there was an endless stream of people going out of the city to avoid disasters, which made the situation even more worrying. Point hurry up and get your sandbags ready and set up a machine gun here and face the intersection. Point soldiers loyal to the government set up fortifications in settlements close to the city, which is even more disturbing. It just seems that these sparse soldiers scattered all over the city. How to resist the nearly 100,000 troops outside the city that are about to become rebels? This has also become a problem. Point this problem also troubled Lieutenant General Livanov, who was temporarily appointed as Sofia's city defense commander, because he only has military police and military cadets, as well as the royal guards and other odds and ends that add up to less than 9,000 troops. What's more, the Romanian army has already entered Ferica, which is only separated from Sofia by the Stera Mountains. Lieutenant General Kudinchev, who commanded the 6th Army, had already promised to use the Stera Mountains, which divide Bulgaria into the north and south, to hold back the enemy, but he could only promise to delay it for 3 days. For this result, Ivanov, who knew the details, was also very satisfied, because he knew that it was Lieutenant General Kudinchev who was using the lives of his soldiers to delay them. But was it worth it when he watched the army outside the city gradually showing signs of rebellion? The question of Lieutenant General Ivanov was actually raised to Radoslav in person. In the Sofia Palace, King Ferdinand I was questioning the Prime Minister. "Prime Minister, is it all worth it?" Faced with a question from the young and powerful king, the Prime Minister, who had been cornered and looked somewhat haggard, answered firmly, "Your Majesty, it's all worth it. because we haven't failed. The reinforcement from Turkey can reach Thessaloniki in only 5 days. In this way, we will let Admiral Zekov send 150,000 troops back to Sofia. And then Dia can also be reinforced from Serbia in about 10 days. In this way, we will have an army of nearly 400,000 people, and we can even counterattack Romania to recover the territories occupied by them, such as Rus and Varna. The words spoken by Prime Minister Radoslav used to make Ferdinand I feel a surge in his heart, but now it makes the king feel that his prime minister is exaggerating. What appeared in his mind was Fyodorov and Milanov, the leaders of the Radical Democratic Party, whom he had met in secret yesterday evening. In this little-known interview, two radical Democrats gave him a detailed description of the current situation in Bulgaria. After hearing that Bulgaria had starved to death hundreds of thousands of people due to famine, and that the soldiers were generally war-weary, and that Bulgaria had lost hundreds of thousands of troops in the face of two sides, the king, who rarely bothered about the situation, decided to fight for the do something about this country. And this interview is actually a step that King Ferdinand gave the prime minister. Unfortunately, the post of prime minister has already made Radoslav dizzy. In other words, joining the allies' camp made him lose his way out, and the prime minister in front of him was still trying to get the king to support his plan. Ferdinand I, king and commander-in-chief of the army for many years, is now very clear. The biggest problem in Bulgaria at the moment is that the soldiers are tired of this war with no visible victory, and no one can solve this problem. Moreover, the prime minister has said so much in front of himself and has been avoiding a key issue, that is, the wishes of the soldiers who have rioted outside the city. Resigning the prime minister and the cabinet is not a difficult choice for the king. And now there is a more urgent problem for him to solve, that is how to ensure the existence of the royal family in Bulgaria. So, when he saw Prime Minister Radoslav gushing about his ridiculous plans, Ferdinand told him directly, "Radoslav heard that you were ill, not in good health." Prime Minister Radoslav, who was still immersed in his own presentation plan, didn't hear the king's intention, that he didn't even bother to say the word prime minister, and answered directly, "Your Majesty, my health is very good, and I have no pain at all." Seeing that the Prime Minister did not understand his own words properly, Ferdinand I said it again very bluntly, "Prime Minister, you are in poor health and must rest." When Ferdinand said the word rest, he deliberately emphasized his tone, which made Radoslav react. Then the Prime Minister looked at the king in disbelief, as if to say it was true. Ferdinand I had one more thing to say about this. "Prime Minister, when you're sick, you can leave your work to someone else, and you'll be fine." Yes, Your Majesty, I'm not in good health, and I really need to rest. After Radoslav finished saying this sentence on and off, as if he had been sucked out of his spirit, then he said it in a somewhat dry tone, "I will announce my resignation tomorrow." Prime Minister Radoslav's words made Ferdinand relieved, and no one could underestimate the voice of the army outside the city. In addition, joining the allied camp is the responsibility of the prime minister to negotiate. If he continues to negotiate a truce with the allies, it will be embarrassing for both sides. After Prime Minister Radoslav said all this, he asked curiously, "Your Majesty, may I ask who will take my place as prime minister?" Facing the issue of Radoslav, Ferdinand I said generously, "The radical Democrat Milanov has a good influence in Britain and France, and he would be a suitable candidate." The king's words made Radoslav's mind show that the man with his eyes and the demeanor of a scholar, when he decided to join the allied camp, disregarded everyone's face and strongly opposed it. Radoslav also had to admit that this candidate is indeed suitable for negotiating a truce. Milanov is indeed a good candidate for negotiation. After sending Prime Minister Radoslav away, Ferdinand recruited a confidant to instruct him. "Send a message to Fyodorov and Milanov immediately. The Prime Minister has agreed to resign, and let them prepare to take over. Then let them immediately go to the British and French commercial agencies in Sofia and inform them of our decision to stop the war. In addition, send a message to General Livanov and tell the soldiers outside the city that the Prime Minister will resign as the leader of the cabinet. Now they should be satisfied." After Ferdinand finished speaking, the attendant nodded in reply. "Okay, Your Majesty, I'll do it now." Looking at the departing attendants, Ferdinand remembered the scene of his consultation with Fyodorov and Milanov last night, and he said to himself, I hope you can guarantee the status of the royal family. It turned out that Ferdinand I decided to let the radical Democrats come to power, and they promised to keep Wang Shi's status for this reason. Just for this move, the royal family needs to give up too many things, and even abdication is very likely. In his mind, Ferdinand was already prepared enough for this, because the news that the Russian Tsar was forced to abdicate and was placed under house arrest made him uneasy. Therefore, for the sake of the country and the royal family, peace talks have become a necessary choice. After all, no one wants to go to the city to negotiate. Baidu search chapter 347 The Thessaloniki Armistice. The news that Bulgaria was seeking peace talks was sent back to their respective countries as soon as they contacted the British and French commercial agencies. And Romania, which is closely related to this, also received the news conveyed by Britain and France at the first time. So that evening, when Prime Minister Bricianu brought the foreign minister to inform Edel of the news, he was having dinner with his family. After putting down the tabloid and taking the telegram, Edel felt his eyes a little wet when he looked at the Prime Minister and the foreign minister, who showed their joy on their faces. The short words of Bulgaria's request for peace mean that Romania is not fighting in the isolated Balkans. There are two concepts with reinforcement and no reinforcement. After putting down the telegram, Edel calmed down and asked, "Is there any other news from England and France?" Prime Minister Bricianu, who knew what Edel wanted to ask, spoke up. "The British and French ambassadors have informed us, considering our country's interests in the Balkans, after drawing up the armistice agreement with Bulgaria, the terms will be sent to us first for review, and then to Bulgaria after there is no objection." The Prime Minister's words made Edel very satisfied. This is the treatment won by the Romanian army on the battlefield, taking Transylvania, flanking Bulgaria, and resisting the German attack. These battles made the combat effectiveness of the Romanian army manifest in front of the world. Now Europe generally refers the Romanian army to the same level as Austria-Hungary. The main reason is that the Romanian reserve mobilization force seems a little weak, which drags down the amazing performance of the standing division in Transylvania. As for Britain and France leading this negotiation, it is also right. As a camp leader, it would be good to take care of Romania's interests when negotiating. The news brought by the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister caused Edel to sleep well all night, and the next day he appeared in front of everyone with two panda eyes. Britain and France also knew the seriousness of the matter. When Bulgaria replaced the cabinet in the morning, the draft armistice agreement with it had been sent to Romania. And this time, Edel convened the military and political parties to discuss the terms together in this armistice agreement drafted by Britain and France overnight. It is mainly aimed at the occupied territories of Greece and Serbia, and the third and fifth articles are most closely related to Romania. The third article is that Bulgaria must stabilize the local situation and not allow the former Allied camp to use its military facilities. The Allies also gave a helping hand clause here. If the Allies invaded Bulgarian territory, the Allies would give them military and material assistance. This is obviously aimed at the reinforcement before Germany and Austria and Turkey. Britain and France want to create some contradictions between Bulgaria and the original Allies, because the reinforcement from Turkey have entered the Bulgarian territory. If its commander is not clever, everyone is willing to see another battle between the Bulgarian and Turkish troops. The fifth article is that Bulgaria must open its ports and gather its trains, ships and other means of transportation for the use of the Allied countries, for which the Allied countries will give rent. This article is the most helpful to Romania, which allows the troops and aid materials of the Allied countries to pass through Bulgaria and continuously supply Romania for use. As for other terms, such as the Bulgarian army must not be withdrawn before the Allied countries take over, and Bulgaria must collect weapons and ammunition to be counted by the Allied countries, etc., are not the focus of Edel's negotiation. In general, the armistice agreement drawn up by Britain and France fully took into account the actual situation in Romania. Knowing that they need the assistance of supplies and troops, many regulations have been made in express delivery to stabilize the situation in Bulgaria. After studying the terms behind closed doors for a morning, Edel looked at the two rows of senior military and political officials and asked, Everyone is alright. No problem at all. The agreement is very reasonable. No comment. Seeing that everyone was satisfied with this, Ed said to Prime Minister Briciano and Foreign Minister Barnosk on his left, inform Britain and France of our attitude. After Romania agreed to the agreement, Britain and France immediately passed the agreement through their Sofia agency to the Radical Democrats, who had just taken office. Faced with the conditions put forward by Britain and France, of course the Bulgarian side needs to bargain. The newly appointed Prime Minister Milinov informed the rioting soldiers outside the city of the government's decision to withdraw from the war. After appeasing them, he immediately drove to Thessaloniki. Because there is the plenipotentiary representative of the Allied powers here, His Excellency Lieutenant General Esperit of France, the Commander-in-Chief of the Allied powers in Greece, as the candidate for negotiating the armistice agreement. The opinions of the soldiers still need to be respected. In order to show respect for the armistice negotiations, the Allies also stopped the fighting in Thessaloniki. And Bulgaria was most worried about the Romanian army led by Lieutenant General Ferit. Of course, in response to the goodwill of the Allies, Bulgaria also ceased all hostilities and ordered the Turkish army to withdraw from its own territory. General Otto Zunders, who commanded the Turkish Third Army, was of course moderate during the trial. When he saw that the situation was not good, he immediately took the Turkish troops back to the Dardanelles, which disappointed Britain and France, who hoped that something would happen to them endlessly. The German and Austrian troops that aided Bulgaria also stopped in Belgrade after seeing the situation changed greatly, waiting for the situation to become clear. However, I believe that it will not be long before they will drive to the Macedonian region to defend the free Allied attack. Therefore, in Thessaloniki, where there is still a smell of gunpowder smoke, the two sides who fought to the death and the life before began to have a heated discussion on the topic of peace. Your Excellency Lieutenant General, we still agree with the terms you gave. It's just that the rent in Article 5 is included in the future compensation. Isn't it too harsh? We also need to resume production after the armistice, and we have given you all the means of transportation. We have too much influence, and we still can't get the rent, which is very difficult for our country to accept. We must know that our treasury has been able to run mice, unless you are willing to paint us a batch of food to stabilize the situation. Faced with the objections of Bulgarian Prime Minister Milinov, Lieutenant General Aspir, the main negotiator of the Entente, spoke up. We have fully considered the difficulties you mentioned, but we are also short of funds now, so we can only rent first, and then we are thinking of ways to rent. As for the food, we can receive some in the market, but you know that due to the lack of funds, only you can figure it out for yourself. In the face of Prime Minister Milinov's dissent, General Aspir immediately dismissed him with no money. As for whether there is no money, the two parties did not care too much, but just tested each other's attitude. In fact, the negotiations in Thessaloniki proceeded very fast. It took 4 days from the beginning of the negotiations on January 26 to negotiate the content of the two sides. According to the reason why their negotiations can be concluded quickly, both parties want to get out of this situation as soon as possible. The Allies needed Bulgaria to withdraw from the influence and practical interests of the war, and Bulgaria could also free up its hands to appease the discontent that was about to erupt at home. Therefore, when both parties have urgent needs, this negotiation can quickly reach a consensus. On January 31st, the two sides officially announced that they had signed an armistice, which announced Bulgaria's withdrawal from the war. The armistice, known as Thessaloniki, stipulated that the Bulgarian army must withdraw immediately from its occupied Greek and Serbian territories. The Bulgarian army immediately prepared for demobilization, and all the weapons, ammunition, and baggage of the demobilized troops were put into storage under the supervision of the Allied army. Bulgaria can only retain 30,000 troops for its own defense needs. The strategic locations such as Montana and Adrianople in Bulgaria were occupied by the Allied forces, and their ports also needed to be open to the Allied and neutral countries. With the withdrawal of Bulgaria, the connection between Germany and Turkey can be said to be cut off. Wool, cotton, dyes, and minerals from the Middle East are blocked, and it is difficult for German weapons and mechanical products to reach Turkey. This has made the situation of the two sides even worse, and it has also given them a headache. Chapter 348 Bone Dry Scarred. The news of Bulgaria's withdrawal from the war caused considerable shock within the entire Allied powers. There are quite a few people talking about it in Vienna, Berlin and Istanbul. Some of them said that this is the first boned rice card to fall point as a government agency in power. The voice of negotiating with Britain and France to reduce losses also appeared in their ears in this regard. The Allies also tested the attitude of Britain and France in private, but they did not reach an agreement because of the huge gap between the two sides. And now with Bulgaria's withdrawal from the war, the Allies have discovered that the situation in the Balkans has fallen into a rather passive and bad situation. In Greece, Serbia, Montenegro and Romania joined the Allied camp, while Bulgaria withdrew from the war. And now the Balkan situation is entirely the Allies have the final say. The link between Germany and Austria and Turkey was cut off, and the situation was quite unfavorable for the Allies. For this reason, Berlin and Vienna have also put aside their own thoughts and dealt with this difficult time together. So with the cooperation of the German and Austrian General Staff, a plan to defend against the Allied forces' attack was introduced. In the plan that combines the essence of the two countries' star thinking here. The German-Austrian coalition will currently defend the Allied attack on the front line of Enice and Luisa in the southern mountains of Serbia. For this reason, Austria-Hungary needs an additional 150,000 troops to complete this plan. There was no objection to the whole plan, but there were still some small disputes when drawing troops, because when formulating the plan, the German staff suggested that Austria-Hungary draw and refit troops from home, but Austria-Hungary did not agree. From Austria-Hungary's point of view, the troops that were rehabilitated by the withdrawing country suffered heavy casualties on the front line. Their weapons and equipment were relatively lacking, and the spirit of the personnel was not very good, so it was better to be drawn from the frontline troops, and Austria-Hungary chose to draw from the Hungarian region, the 9th Army, that confronted Romania in Transylvania. This decision was considered too dangerous by the Germans. If Romania broke out of the Transylvanian plateau, the Hungarian plains would face the danger of war. Do you feel that the style of painting is wrong? Germany is more concerned about its safety than Austria-Hungary. In fact, these are all obvious reasons. Germany's inner thinking is that Austria-Hungary needs to put pressure on the Romanian army in Transylvania to ensure that Marshal Mackenson's flank will not be threatened. And Austria-Hungary transferred Hungarian troops for the Italian battlefield, and the repaired troops can also be urgently transferred to the front line. Face it calmly. But in the end, Austria-Hungary's decision prevailed. After all, it was its troops that needed to be used. The Turkish side was much more nervous than Austria-Hungary. After Bulgaria withdrew from the war, not only the 3rd Army had withdrawn to the Dardanelles defense, but even the 6th Army, which was ready to be transferred to Syria to fight the Allies, also stayed in Istanbul. For a time, Turkey gathered nearly 400,000 troops near its capital, which surprised the Allies, fearing that Germany and Austria and Turkey would also attack. So after the defeat of Bulgaria, the Greek army in the Allied powers was transferred to Adrianople to prepare for the possible invasion of the Turkish army. The rest of the Allied armies paid attention to the movements of the German and Austrian troops for a time. Because of the change in Bulgaria, both sides felt a little bit of a fight, and the situation became delicate. However, this is not a big impact on Romania, because domestic materials are abundant. Since the signing of the armistice agreement in Thessaloniki, supplies from the Allied countries have supplemented the consumption of the Romanian army along the Bulgarian railway. According to statistics after the fact, within 3 months after Bulgaria withdrew from the war, up to 1.2 million tons of military supplies were sent to Romania. Of course, along with the supplies that have been delivered, there are also reinforcement from the Allied countries. A colonial division from France and 2 British Indian and Ants divisions had rushed to Romania, easing the pressure on the Romanian army's defense at Bacău. True, the Germans were led by Marshal Mackensen, although no loopholes in the Romanian army were found. However, with its excellent frontline officers, experienced soldiers, and fierce firepower, the Moldavian army led by Admiral Courtois, who was still fighting, retreated steadily, causing His Excellency Admiral to give up Roman and Iat Sen one after another. West Point. A large number of conscripts were put into the defense against the German invasion, and many of the conscripts failed to survive the first battle point according to the statistics of the General Staff. In the battle with the German army, the Romanian army has suffered close to 100,000 casualties. Among them, the lack of training of recruited soldiers and the lack of grassroots officers are the main factors, of course. Admiral Courtois, as their commander, also has certain responsibilities, but who let him face the German army's most outstanding mobile warfare master, Marshal Mackensen. This makes His Excellency Admiral dare not take risks, for fear of letting the opponent seize the opportunity to tear the defense line, which is not so wonderful. However, when Bulgaria withdrew from the war, the pressure from the German army was much less, especially when the British and French troops appeared on the back or front. The German offensive gradually decreased, and many times it was just a perfunctory thing. It seems that the Germans also know that they have no chance of quickly conquering Romania. Of course, the consumption of personnel and materials of the German army is also a major factor, especially the consumption of materials. This is the point where Marshal Mackensen, the commander-in-chief of the German army on the Eastern Front, has the most say. After the declaration of war in Romania, Marshal Mackensen spent a month preparing for the war with the logistics department on the issue of military supplies. Because Ludendorff was preparing for the offensive on the Western Front, the supplies supplied by the Eastern Front before that were not enough for combat readiness, and Mackensen could only maintain the loss by reducing the amount of training. However, after Romania declared war, the movement of materials did increase, but it was still not enough for half a year's combat readiness. This is the operational standard Mackensen prepared after serving as commander-in-chief of the Eastern Front. Even when Marshal Mackensen led the army to attack Romania, he still did not meet the standard. Only 5 months of combat readiness. Therefore, I have always hoped that the loopholes in the Romanian army's defense line could be found and used by Gari. To this end, he also deliberately sold several flaws to lure the Romanian army to attack. However, who knows that the commander of the Romanian army is not fooled, so Marshal Mackensen can only use the advantages of firepower and elite troops to compete with the enemy city by city. The management effect is good, but the consumption of ammunition is too high. Just yesterday, the logistics officer informed His Excellency the Marshal that their ammunition was only 1/3 of what it was before departure. This sentence made the German offensive immediately misfire. The attacking German army was immobile, and the defending Romanian army was equally immobile. The huge casualties and material consumption also made Romania devastated, so at this point in the most intense fighting in Moldavia, the war also calmed down. As for Transylvania, which has been much quieter, it is even possible to rotate the officers and soldiers to rest. Chapter 349 Return to Hometown 1. Crench. With both hands, he pushed open the door that had not been opened for several years, and Misk, who was wearing a colonel's uniform, looked at the room that had long been deserted. This is the place where I have lived since I was a child. From babbling to being full of youth, Misk lives here. Looking at the dilapidated yet familiar scene, he remembered the face that was about to blur the word home made Misk feel emotional, and here he remembered the time when he was playing in the fields with his father as a child. When Misk looked at his dilapidated home, after being separated for several years, a call brought him back to reality. Misk. He looked up and saw that it was his younger brother Broku who had rushed over with his cousin. Bougainville. I hadn't seen Broku, who was already in his prime, for several years. He watched Misk come to him overjoyed and patted his shoulder. It's really you. Before I heard the news, I couldn't believe it. Who knew it was true? Looking at the somewhat dilapidated house, Broku said embarrassedly. In the past few years, I can only help you to renovate the house occasionally, so the house is a bit shabby. But I believe that, as long as you find someone to clean it up in 2 days, it will still be the same as before. Facing the self-blame of his friend, Misk said quickly, "Thank you for your care over the years. It's not easy to ensure that it is so good. I don't plan to live in it. I keep it mainly as a memory." Seeing that Misk did not plan to live here, Broku said enthusiastically, "Go to my place, we can talk after. We haven't seen you for many years." Then Broku spoke ostentatiously. You don't know yet. Yuna is now my wife. Broku's words reminded Mizik of arguing with him about who was the most beautiful in the village when he was young. At that time, Broku said that Yuna, a girl with big breasts and some freckles on her face, also said that if she could marry in the future to be a wife. For this reason, Broku went to peek at other people's baths. Who knew that he was caught by someone else's father, but he didn't expect him to fulfill his dream. Congratulations, Bralku. Mizk's words made Broku smile, and at this moment he felt that he was the winner in life. I heard that you became an officer in Romania. That's it. Ilzabi, this bastard, will definitely not be able to sleep. Broku's question. Mizk felt that his friend still had not changed, and was still so nagging. While Broku was chattering about his joy, Bougainville, his cousin, also interrupted to say hello. Mizik, long time no see. Looking at Bougainville with traces of the years on his face, Mizik replied, yeah, we haven't seen each other in years. Time flies. Are you still working at Constanta? Mizik is still very grateful to his cousin Broku who took him to Romania. If he hadn't taken him out to meet the world, he probably wouldn't have achieved what he is now. Facing Mizk's question, Bougainville shook his head and said, I came back last year, and my parents are getting older and need to be taken care of, and my son is not too young, so it's not good to have no one to discipline him. Bougainville's words made Mizk a little sad. Others have parents, wives and children to form a complete family, but he has not yet found them. Seeing that Mizk's face was a little gloomy, Bralku, who was a friend, immediately diverted his attention. How long are you going to stay this time? The friend's question. Mizk answered calmly, I'll stay for a few days this time. The war hasn't subsided yet, and I can only come back because I'm not far from home. Are you coming back this time for that old bastard Ilzabi? Bralku's words made Mizk a little silent. If a few years ago, Mizik would have said yes, he dreamed that it would be better to give him a chance to face Ilzabi alone, and he would have collapsed the bastard who killed his father. But now he doesn't see it that way, because Ilzabi isn't worth the price. Because he has a better way to get revenge. So in the face of his friend's question, Mizk smiled and didn't speak, which made Bougainville a little confused about his friend's mind. Mizik is back. One day after Mizik came back, news about this in the town spread among the residents. He became an officer in Romania. Ilzabi will probably not be able to sleep at night now. In the streets and alleys, everyone secretly conveys the news. Some of them are happy and some are sad. However, most of the happy are the Romanians, who are mostly civilians, while the more affluent Hungarians are sad. As the largest landowner in Bradtown, Ilzabi of course knew that, and he even asked someone to inquire about it, and Eva, I don't know. Mizk is famous in the army. Ilzabi is not without knowledge, and he has been awarded a major in his early 30s, which is definitely a promising future among officers from civilians thinking of a major in his early 30s. He could have been in the army for at least 15 years. In this case, it is very possible that he will be a general. Every time I think of this, Ilzabi is filled with regret. I was dizzy at the time. Didn't I just build a garden? Why did it look so ugly? What should I do now? Ilzabi was extremely entangled in his heart, and if he had to blame it, he would blame the damn war situation. Who would have thought that Romanians would be so crazy that they would dare to declare war on a country that is allied on 3 sides? And the army was a waste. In the face of the Romanians' attack, they were defeated, and they were directly beaten out of Transilvania. This is the territory of the empire for a long time. Except for those lunatics who hide in the shadows and preach that Romanians should form a country, who would think that this place should be ruled by Romania. You know, decades ago, they needed imperial and German protection from Russia. Thinking of this, Ilzabi cursed again in his heart. This ungrateful country. It's just that the situation is better than people now. After Romania occupied Deva and defeated the imperial army, his life in the town was not easy. He also knew that what he had done could be dangerous, so he sent his children and belongings to Budapest overnight, where a cousin could take care of him. And I stayed behind to guard the family business. After all, this is what I have worked hard to earn, so I can't just give up. It was only during this period that from time to time there were Romanian mudlegs pointing behind him, as if he had forgotten the grace of the empire. In this regard, Ailsabi can only pray when the army will come back, when he wants these mudlegs to look good. Chapter 350 Return to Hometown, Part 2. Question mark? Just when Ailsabi was venting his dissatisfaction, a servant hurried in. Point master, did someone sue you? Ailsabi was a little unhappy at the thoughtless words of the servant. What happened? In the face of Ailsabi's inquiry, the servant immediately told the news he had just heard. It turned out that the servants went to buy vegetables today, and I heard someone say that Romania plans to send officials to clean up the government affairs. And someone in town is saying that this is to clean up the influence of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in Transylvania, especially the Hungarians who now occupy the upper echelons of the region's economic base. As a loyal servant who is also Hungarian, he immediately rushed home to tell him the news after hearing the servant's words. Ailsabi pondered in the room. To be the most powerful person in town, Ailsabi still has enough convincing ability. As soon as he heard the servant's words, he felt that something was wrong, and the news seemed unreliable at first glance. During the war, Romania wanted to cleanse them. People with some knowledge of politics would scoff at this. Isn't the Romanian government afraid that the entire region will be in chaos? If you're worried, worry more about the purges that will follow after the war is over. As diva and a small powerful Hungarian, Ailsabi also made contact with nearby Hungarians. The general opinion is that after the war, if the Allies win, there will be a wave of purges in Transylvania, which will be assigned to Romania, and they will be the targets of purges. In the face of this very likely situation, we have nothing more than a few solutions after deliberation. One is to wrestle the property in hand to the Romanians, and bring the money back to Hungary to start anew. This approach is better than safe and reliable, and it ran away before the Romanian government cleaned up. But the disadvantage is that these industries will be sold at a low price. To what extent? According to Ailsabi's knowledge, someone in the next county sold a vineyard and winery worth 680,000 lei, and the bidder gave him the highest price of 70,000 lei, only 10% of the price. You must know that many industries are handed down by the family through generations, and no one is reconciled to being taken advantage of. But now the buyers who dare to bid seem to have agreed that it is the price that you like to sell or not. Such a move made many people give up the idea of selling, but only a few people seemed to smell something and resolutely chose to sell. The second is to choose to unite with the local Romanians and wrestle some of the shares of the industry to them, but the price is equally low. At present, the most powerful party in Transylvania is the Romanian National Party. Many middle and senior members of the party have doubled their worth during this period. The advantage of doing this is that the loss is much higher than that of a cheap sale, and it can basically keep half of one's own industry. This is also the current practice of most of the Hungarian elites in the region. And there is another advantage of doing this. That is, when the empire comes back, he can rely on the government to get back the shares sold. The last option is to neither sell nor sell shares, but to wait and see what happens. These types of people are generally unwilling to sell at a low price, and because of their poor reputation, or offending the Romanian dignitaries and other reasons, they cannot find a powerful Romanian who is willing to take over their shares, so they can only delay and want to see the situation. Say it again. There are even bargain sales, where no one wants to buy. And Ailsabi is the type with a bad reputation, so of course he is also the most sensitive to any troubles. This news is passed so quickly, someone must be doing something wrong. Ailsabi came to a conclusion first, and then he immediately thought about who was going to mess with him. Is it him? Ailsabi immediately showed the figure of Mizik, who had just returned to his hometown, and then denied it himself. Impossible. He doesn't have this ability yet. It's not that Ailsabi underestimated Mizik. He has understood that Mizik, who is currently only a major and is not a key position, cannot have such a large energy to promote this move. At least it needs to be at the general level to be possible. However, after thinking about it for a long time, Ailsabi still could not find a possible candidate, or that there were too many candidates, and he did not know who did it. What Ailsabi, who was just staying in the manor and wanted to break his head, didn't know that several people with unfamiliar faces in Bradtown had arrived in the town, uneasy listening to their instructions. Now that Transylvania is a Romanian territory, you will also become Romanian officials. Since you are Romanian officials, you need to know that the handling of government affairs in Romania is very different from Austria-Hungary. Do you understand? Listening to the words of the Romanian government inspector named Derils on the stage, these grassroots officials in the town nodded their heads with a flattering smile. Understand, understand, we all understand. Can you not understand? As an official in a small town, I was called here and faced the Romanian government's inspection for the first time. It's good to know. Errol's didn't seem to see the expressions of these officials and still spoke in his dispassionate voice. Originally, according to the regulations, you will be sent to Cluj to study and then decide whether you will stay or stay. However, during the war, everything has been simplified and changed to your own on-the-job learning. Next, I will send each person a copy of the materials that need to be studied. I hope everyone can pass the examination in the future. After finishing speaking, someone immediately sent them a copy of a thick book-like material. Errol's continued to talk after seeing that everyone had a copy. You can go back and look at the information. In the future, these are the contents that you must know. But for now, you need to pay more attention to the actual work situation. The officials present even at the grassroots level knew the art of language and immediately understood the words of the official who led the Errol's team. This is a new government needs to see the performance of its actual work. So how do you behave as yourself? This is not easy. According to the attitude of the previous work, just swap the status of the Romanian and the Hungarian. As for the fact that Hungarians are the majority among them, this is even less of a problem. As the saying goes, only the muzzle of one's own people can be the greatest threat. We all know the bottom line, and only by bullying can we grasp the strength. Among them, there must be hardliners who love their motherland, but after all, it is good to replace them with a few. Maybe your nobility sets off his despicable actions, which will make his resentment and anger more violent. This is also a good thing for the Romanian government, knowing that what they learned in the training they received before they were sent, the biggest part was how to divide the Hungarians in the region. So for this kind of Hungarian officials who oppress their own ethnic group, the government can't wait for more. PS. I know that there are few updates in the past 2 days, but don't worry, I will make up for the 4 missing updates. There are 4 shifts today, let's make up 2 shifts first. Dear, click in and give a good comment. The higher the score, the faster the update. It is said that those who give full marks to the new ones have found a beautiful wife at the end. The mobile station is newly revised and upgraded. The address, data and bookmarks are synchronized with the computer station. No advertisements. Fresh reading. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.